It's time for MacBreak Weekly. Jason Snell is here with his colorful charts. Andy Aiko with his fabulous dad jokes. And Alex Lindsay with his many ways to spend all your money. This week we'll be talking, of course, about Jason's colorful charts. The Apple results are in. Big winners, big losers. I think everybody's a winner when it comes to Apple's stock price. We'll also talk about how Apple saves money in its deals with TSMC, where that money might be going in a deal with ARM, and rumors about the iPhone 15 and the M3 MacBook Pro. That and a whole lot more coming up next on MacBreak Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is MacBreak Weekly, episode 881, recorded Tuesday, August 8th, 2023. Cookster's Billions. MacBreak Weekly is brought to you by Mylio. Mylio Photos is a smart and powerful system that lets you easily organize, edit, and manage years of important documents, photos, and videos in an offline library hosted on any device. And it's free. Visit mylio.com/twit. And by ZipRecruiter. If you're hiring, you know it's hard to attract top talent. Team up with a hiring partner who understands how tough it is and knows what you need. ZipRecruiter. Go to this exclusive web address to try ZipRecruiter for free. ZipRecruiter.com/MacBreak. It's time for MacBreak Weekly, the show where we click away at our deepest insecurities. Alex Lindsay's in a hotel, and he doesn't like the clicking in the background. Hi, Alex.
It was clicking. It was clicking. It turned out to be my cable, I think. I don't think it was you. I think I had a longer USB cable than I expected. So it was picking up something. So
090.media. Alex rarely gets out of the house. Where are you today?
I'm in Los Angeles. I'm right across from the LA Convention Center. We have SIGGRAPH, which is the big graphics conference going on this week. And so I was at the production summit last Friday, and then SIGGRAPH over the next couple of days. And we're, looking at lots of things, a lot of excitement around nerfs. So there's a lot of nerfs going on here. These are neural radiance fields, and
holy moly!
So everyone's talking about that. That's the big talk of the show. But there's a big race between Unity and Unreal, and it's very exciting. I know
SIGGRAPH's been around forever. I remember going down in 1992 with Halsey Minor, who was the founder of CNET, and he wanted to see what was going on at SIGGRAPH. And so we flew down. I remember we flew down, I think probably from Oakland on a turboprop. And I think Halsey never forgave. He had me book the flight. I guess I was his executive assistant. And he never forgave me for that. So my relationship with CNET was short-lived thereafter. But I did fly the VR Dragon. You wore a headset. It was so big, and it had a big
This is 1992
cable.
You were flying a VR Dragon?
1992. It was hooked up to a SGI, probably an Onyx or something like that. Yeah. And you would get on a saddle.
Yeah.
And then you'd hold handlebars like you were on a motorcycle, and then put the thing on, and it was like you were flying a dragon.
You probably do that now with like a small laptop or even like a little.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's gotten. I mean, it's come so far. There's they're talking about nearly 100 core processors and stuff like that. It's
very
slick.
Cool. What a world we live in. Also with us, Mr. Andy Aiko from WGBH Boston. Hello, Andrew.
Somehow it always comes down to flying dragons. Like there was a time like when SIGGRAPH was all about, hey, look how quickly we can render this Volkswagen Bug. Or it went from teapots to Volkswagen Bugs to dragons now. And now I don't know what it is, the modern kind.
Yeah. Well, we're here doing whatever it is we do. If you want to ride something while you're listening, be my guest. You could close your eyes and imagine a wonderful world of entertainment with the four of us surrounding you. Jason Snell would be the fourth. He actually does do surround video on his incomparable podcast.
I have done that. And of course, this was just another week in the spreadsheet mines for me.
It's time for color charts.
Yeah, Apple releases its earnings. And what do? I immediately tip back the head of William Shakespeare, flip the button, slide down the pole into the chart cave.
Into the bat
where
cave.
the charts are made. Yeah.
I more imagine you like Despicable Me, where like you go downstairs and there's minions, just like a million like yellow pill shaped things, basically with carrying bars.
They
and carrying
come in
dots.
6 colors, Andy. Stay with the
those
branding,
minions.
okay? Come on.
Oh, those minions. So I guess let's go to the graphs. But before we do, top line for us, Jason.
It depends. I'd say that this was a boring quarter for various degrees of boring. Some people have said it was a bad quarter. Some said it was a good quarter.
Stock market said it was a bad quarter because, as usual, the analysts made predictions Apple didn't live up to. And so,
right. And it's all priced into the stock. Although the Wall Street consensus was that it would be down 1.5% revenue year over year, and it was down 1%. So they actually beat the consensus. But I think, as with everything Wall Street, stock prices are influenced by changes in expectation, and so you get a run up when people expect more than you get. I'm not sure how making $20 billion in profit in a quarter is boring, but that's where we are now. They were actually up in profit because, interesting little detail, how do you go down in revenue and up in profit? And the answer is they cut their expenses. This is where you see them not hiring and letting people go via attrition and reducing expenses in a bunch of areas. And therefore, they actually went up year over year in profit, even though they were down a little bit in revenue. They ran a little more efficiently. And this is also one of the more boring Apple quarters in general, because they didn't release any major products and the iPhone isn't out yet, and they're a very seasonal company. So in the end, it was more services. The services continue to bubble over. Everything else was kind of flat. iPad and Mac were down. Because I think that we're seeing the effects of people buying iPads and Macs during an immediate aftermath of pandemic lockdowns, and those people have bought them now, and they don't need to buy a new one this year. So, again, for various, if you're an investor, maybe you have an opinion about the 1% down year over year. It's very hard not to look at $20 billion in profit and say, I guess they're doing okay.
Yeah, and also most of the analysts on all the different quarterly results are basically agreeing that people are just buying fewer smartphones, people are buying fewer laptops, and so it's not necessarily a failure of Apple that they are suffering from some of the same effects as everybody else. Yeah. And Tim Cook even acknowledged that it's one of the other reasons is that we had a lot of people still buying M1 Apple Silicon Macs, and so therefore that was like the starting gate for a new upgrade cycle that now they're kind of in the middle of, as people are waiting for M3 and for waiting for their original M1s to age out of the system.
And if you see where Apple succeeded versus sort of like having losses, They even called it out. United States and the Americas in general, but the United States smartphone market is pretty sluggish right now. They are seeing success and growth in lots of other markets, but in the U.S., it's not. It's their most important market in a lot of ways, and it's sluggish in the U.S.
Is that saturation? Is that what's going on, you think?
Yeah, and people maybe buying during the last couple of years, pulling ahead tech purchases. But yeah, it's saturated, and the phones are so good now that they last a lot longer. That's why Apple starts to do things like have their replacement program. That's why they will pay you. Like my daughter, we bought her a phone when she went to college. She just graduated. We got her a new phone, and we sold back her old phone to Apple for like $200, like a substantial amount of money for a 4-year-old phone. So obviously Apple is trying to grease the skids as much as possible for you to upgrade, and then taking those phones and refurbing them and using them for parts or recycling them or selling them, in another country that doesn't want to buy a full price iPhone, depending on how you want to view that. But yeah, I think that's the truth, is that they are trying everything they can, but I think we all have smartphones and are all pretty happy with them in the US. And that is, there's still a cycle, right? But it's not an expanding cycle anymore. You're just selling new phones to people who already use your phone.
It's always a sad moment in a father's life when he buys his daughter their last iPhone.
That's probably not going to be the last.
I love your optimism that I'm not going to have to be buying her a new phone in 4 years out of guilt.
Yeah, I think that one of the real challenges that's going to keep on coming up for Apple is that they're making, and other companies as well, the hardware is outpacing the software. So for most people, Do they really need a new computer? Do they really need a new iPhone? Do they really need an iPad? At some point you go, I mean, my kids are still using the first iPad 12.9 Pro, and they still use it every day, like when they're at home. So they're, and that's the problem is that the apps themselves, and this is where Apple has to kind of help developers, but the bottom line is that the apps themselves are working very well. And when I look at buying the Mac Minis that I've bought, I expect to be using those for 5 or 10 years. And now maybe I'll ratchet it down, but they're so powerful that I can do an awful lot with them for an awful long time. And that's a real problem when it comes to cycling.
Yeah, they don't break either. You can drop these things a few times. They don't put that in the, I mean, the number of times I've had to buy something because something that's non-Apple because, hey, I need to test this out, and the thing overheats and it pops like after a year or two, or I dropped this phone and that was just it. That makes you appreciate the quality of Apple construction. Forget about innovation. Forget about like the technology. Forget about Apple Silicon. It's all about just the damn thing is okay to survive life.
I mean, I was on the phone and working on my pool, and I fell into the pool, like into the deep end. So someone just heard whoop, and went all the way down, got back out, and I was fairly confident it was going to work. But I set my phone down, of course, dried it all off, shook it a little bit, hoped it, and within a couple minutes, I was back to like nothing had happened before. Yeah, it's kind of incredible.
On the analyst call, Tim Cook said, the American sales are flat. That's why China is becoming so important to us. Good thing to remember.
And India.
Yeah, but good thing to remember.
And rest of world. But it's true. Actually, Europe, it's funny when you think about the iPhone, any place where the iPhone is not majority market share,
like Europe,
is a really big opportunity for Apple. And that's, the US, it's majority market share, right? So it's a lot less of an opportunity there to convert people than it is in Europe. But certainly India and China and other parts of the world that are places where they think they've got a lot of growth potential.
Yeah, he didn't mention this in his main comments, but there was a Q&A question about it, and he of course mentioned, he was asked about India and emerging markets and gave a long answer about how well and how much optimism they have for India. But they also called out Indonesia, Mexico, the Philippines, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, Brazil, India, Malaysia. So clearly, the fact that he had this all on his mind means that it's like most companies who are making phones, they're concerned about the places where they have not managed to sell a phone to literally everybody in the country yet, and there's still a lot of globe left to cover. Is it
important to him? Is it that he reassure investors? Is he trying to? It sounds a little bit like, hey, don't worry because we've got all these other markets. It's going to be okay. Or does he care? Is it his job to reassure the street?
Well, yeah, that's obvious. That's the whole point of these earnings calls. I mean, the company's required to do that, but it's also a place where they are not
spin zone.
It's spin, right? It's spin. I say this every quarter that this is why I love reading the transcripts, because when you see an Apple event for the press and for the consumers, they can maybe leave the y-axis on a chart unlabeled and hope that you think that curve means what you think it is. But on an earnings call, like, there are major consequences if they like misdirect or if they lie. And so it is a place for them to say frankly to people who are going to have a material effect on Apple in the future. So yeah, you see, and it's also often a time for them to really express, here's what we believe in a company going forward. They're one of the few companies this quarter that spent a lot of time in the prepared remarks talking about just things like diversity, talking about the environment. A lot of that seemed to have been in vogue a year or two ago across all tech, but now Apple seems to be the only people who are going to spend an entire paragraph of that transcript talking about their carbon initiatives. So yeah, it is a place to raise the flag, but it is also a place to convince people that we're not dopes. We're not going to buy a social media app and then make you wonder why you're putting any money into us, that kind of stuff.
I think the nature of an Apple investor, and I'm not one, I've never been one, kind of can't be one. I think, though, they have trained most of their investors into thinking that Apple is a long hold, I guess they would call it a hold stock. It is a long game they're playing. Tim Cook literally, I believe, used the phrase long game, that the idea that they are looking for the long view in terms of their investment in R&D, which they talked about. The one place that they didn't cut resources is that when they talk, and this is the thing that I think they're heading off criticism by talking about why they think their commitment to green tech and green energy and being carbon neutral and recycling all of their materials. They are tying that in with the idea that this is a long game. And those are the investors that they want, right? They're not, I don't think the bulk of Apple investors are people just popping in and out because they think there's a good quarter. I think that they look at the position of the iPhone and how profitable it is and say, this is a company that is playing a very long game and is going to be around and successful for a long time, so that they're not as worried about the vagaries of sort of like month to month. But they certainly, when they do that call, they like to call that stuff out. I think they're trying to sort of define the terms of the argument and say, big picture here, everybody, don't sweat it too much, because you can get overwhelmed by the little details and lose the big picture.
Yeah. One of my favorite Tim Cook moments was when I forget whether it was an analyst or an investor who got a little bit shirty with him at a meeting about how, well, you're putting all this money into environmental stuff and blah, blah, blah stuff, and that money should be going to blah, blah, blah. And he said almost as flatly as he possibly could that we think that we're a really good investment. If you are concerned about that, we invite you to sell your stock. I assure you that people will buy it from you.
Yeah. I mean, another way they blunt the criticism is they have been embarking on a policy that, oh my God, I think it's been like 10 years now at least, where they are aggressively buying back stock, which raises stock prices. They returned their dividend, which they didn't used to do, and they officially have made it a policy that they will become, I forget what Luca Maestri, the CFO, says, something like a cash neutral position over time, which is hilarious because it's been that way for years now, and they can't get there because they make money too fast. They can't get to cash neutral. They cannot spend it as fast as they're bringing it in. I think they have 40-some billion in net cash right now, just in the mattresses, because they've got, they do some stuff with hedging and they've got debt, but they've also got cash. But the net out is, I think, in the 40 billion range in cash. Wow. So they want to get to neutral, but it's hard to get to neutral when you've made a machine that throws off $20 billion in profit.
Yeah, you're making more than $1 billion a week. You really got to find
hard to spend.
Start buying amusement parks or something.
It's a real Brewster's Billions kind of situation there, right? How do I spend it? I don't know.
And that very much, I mean, we have to also remember that very much it stabilizes the stock a lot. When you're doing dividends, when you're doing buybacks, it not just pushes up the stock, but it just stabilizes. So every time up and down, people are like, well, yeah, but I'm still getting all these dividends.
Right.
And their stock position, I mean, their cash position used to be much higher. So they were in the hundreds of millions of dollars. They got up to billions,
almost 200 billion. Yeah.
And that creates its own problems at some point. And so
that was because a lot of that was offshored, and they couldn't spend it in the U.S. So once Trump allowed them to reinstate it, I think now they've been able to spend it a little bit more vigorously.
Right, but the buyback thing helps insulate them from criticism from investors too, right? That it's like we're using a lot of our profit to buy back stock.
They borrow for that, right? They don't spend their own cash for that.
And we have to remember.
I mean, they have so much that there's a lot of, they've got a lot of debt, but they've also got the cash for it, so it nets out to 40 billion.
When it was free money. They may not be borrowing now because they
may not be borrowing as much now with the kind of interest rates they're getting now. But they're just doing the math, like which is the best one, and so, but the other thing to remember is that a lot of the benefactors of this slow push of stock value and so on and so forth, when we talk about stockholders, a very large number of stockholders are their employees. So their employees are getting these stock options all the time, and so this is something that it's important for most of these companies. When you see companies lose stock value by 50%, there's a lot of employees that are like, well, that was my retirement, and now I don't. They look at the value of their retirement went down by 50%. So it is really important to employees that stock remains stable or continues to move north.
That was the reason Steve Jobs gave for not going public years ago. He didn't want his employees looking at the stock ticker all the time. Right. He wanted them working. But it's part of the compensation deal now in Silicon Valley. If you can't offer stock, you're going to be at a disadvantage hiring the best people. Yeah. And the stock has to be worth something.
I'm sorry. The stock buybacks, just quickly, are becoming a little bit controversial, because when you see pushback against paying your employees better, resistance to unionization, things like that, it makes a company look not great when you have to point to, here's how much money you spent buying yourself back. You're saying that you can't afford like $16. So you can't afford $18 an hour. You can't afford $20 an hour. You can't afford to allow collective bargaining, that sort of stuff. It's not like that's a huge problem, but it's becoming more of a fly on the windshield than it has in the past.
Yeah, Cookster should have some better ways to spend his billions, I think. Luca Maestri said Apple was taking does he have an Italian accent? I feel like anybody named.
Yes, he does.
He said a deliberate approach in managing our spend, according to this guy Jason Snell in Macworld.
He's not quite that Italian. This is the Pope, but he is. I'll just say the Whisper AI speech to text does a great job of transcribing Luca Maestri, so his English is spot on.
A deliberate approach in managing our spend.
Yeah, that it's like, how do you say we're trying to spend less money
costs? Yeah,
but we're not. But we made 20 billion, so like. Because they famously, as we've talked about on this show, like they're not doing big layoffs or anything like that, but they want to send the message that they're being fiscally responsible, which is why they do the deliberate slowdown of their expenses, but not, he will point out on several occasions, not R&D. The R&D expenses are actually still pretty high, and they basically say, look, that's what we are as a company, is R&D. We have to do that.
Which is funny because for years Apple was not a big R&D spender. That's something relatively new, right? Am I right?
Yeah, but it's also, getting 20 billion in profit every quarter is also relatively new for them. It's only been in the last 10 years that they've been so huge. And I think they've decided like one place to spend that is just it's like creating this whole cycle of like put it back into the R&D so we stay ahead in areas that allow us to keep making money.
Hence the Vision
what
Pro.
Apple's really and what Apple's really doing, and potentially the car, but what Apple needs to keep doing, and what they're doing pretty well, is not really looking for how do we make easy profits, but how do we do things? How do we build products in a way that are hard? Like how do we make everybody else play a game that they can't afford to play?
Oh, that's interesting.
The R&D, so the R&D helps keep pushing that and making it much harder for everyone else in comparison, because they're just playing a game. If you don't have $20 billion to get into this poker game, then you need to move somewhere else.
Right. Like Apple Silicon's a great example of that, where they put in the 100%. Time and the money. They bought PA Semi, but they also did a multi-year process where it's not cheap to design your own chips year after year after year, and then also pay TSMC to build factories in order to build them and to put you on their new 3-nanometer process. Like it costs a fortune, but it's another one of those places that's a bulwark against the competition, right? Like fundamentally, that's a huge advantage for them that they didn't have when they were relying on other people's chips, and it was worth them spending that money for that.
In fact, that's one of the stories of the week that TSMC has basically allocated every chip they've got to Apple for the next year. And
remember when they did that with flash memory? It's the same thing when the iPod was all flash based and everybody wanted to compete with the iPod. One of the huge it wasn't just competing with Apple. You had on a product level with consumers, you had to compete with Apple to get the flash memory to put in your players, because Apple did these like 4 or 5 year contracts where they just bought it all, and everybody else got it to the back of the line.
And that is such a historic. That's such a historic play, because that's even the iPod. Like there was only one place you could get that Toshiba mini micro mechanical hard drive mechanism, and Apple locked that.
We'll take them all.
According to Wayne Ma in the information, one of the deals Apple has made with TSMC is that TSMC pays for the defects. They eat the cost of defects that crop up in the new manufacturing process, and so. This is the story, is how Apple will save billions of dollars on chips for the new iPhone. So it really, TSMC needs Apple as much as Apple needs TSMC. Clearly, they're making a sweetheart deal to Apple, according to TSMC.
I mean, Apple's also funding the building of these factories that will eventually they just will get to use on other products for other people, right? So it's a good deal for everyone, I think.
Ma quotes Brent Simpson, a partner at technology research firm Arete Research, who says, Apple and TSMC is the best strategic relationship in all of tech. Nothing comes close to their win-win strategy. It's good for both. So very interesting.
Yeah, I believe it. Apple has a real track record with making good deals with chip makers. I don't know. Next week, we'll probably save this for next week because next week is the 25th anniversary of the iMac, I think.
Wow.
But famously, or at least semi-famously, one of the reasons the iMac worked at all is that they strong-armed, no pun intended, Motorola to give them a super sweet deal on the G3 for the iMac because it was not feasible with the list price of the G3. And a bunch of people, including, I think, Greg Joswiak, who's now Apple's head of marketing, went to Motorola and basically talked them into a deal that I think Motorola instantly regretted in order to get that chip for a low price. So it's fascinating. When you're Apple, I mean, they've never made their own chips. They design them, but they've never made them. So you gotta get the silicon price right or your product falls apart. So they're still doing it.
Ma points out that whenever you have a new node, like the 3 nanometer node, you're going to have huge defects. He says the yield on the 3 nanometer wafers is 70-80%, which means that 20 to 30% of them are no good, and that TSMC is basically eating it. Normal customers will buy the wafer, including the bad, dies on it. But Apple doesn't have to pay for them. They only pay for known good dies.
Maybe a short-term deal. Maybe, over time it'll be different. Also, I'll point out, I hadn't really thought about this before, but a lot of the variation that we see in Apple's chips is binning, right? It's a chip that does not qualify for everything, and that's why it's got fewer GPUs or fewer CPUs, and that's how they have different variations of the Pro and the Max and the regular chip and all of that. I wonder if we'll see more of that in this generation, in the M3 generation. I don't know how, when a chip goes bad in this process, is it just sort of dead, or are they going to end up with a certain number that are just, iffy, but that they can be used at a lower level? Because we may see a lot more of that if that's the case.
When we think about that also, that they usually just aren't performing at the level that they were spec'd at. Right. So oftentimes with the chips, you have chips that are faster are the ones that, and then the other ones, they start to not work as well at a certain speed, and so they pull it back into a safe speed. But those chips are, we just have to remember that those chips could be used for other things. They're just not as fast as the M1 in this spec. You have hardware, other Apple hardware that's using M1 silicon that potentially could be using those chips as well. So there's a lot of interesting opportunities there.
The only other people buying 3 nanometer chips from TSMC is Intel, and that will happen at the earliest next year. Intel is paying for the 3 out of 10 dies that don't work. Sorry, Intel.
That's okay for Intel because they have multiple channels, so that they can basically downgrade downgrade a CPU and sell it as something else. But basically saying that the stuff that's defective and doesn't work, well, that's not part of it, so you're not going to be able to use that.
Well, I'm really curious what known good chips means. That if they're not good, they're not working at all, or if they're merely going to have to be binned. So we don't know that from Wayne's story and the information.
We see that all across the supply chain. There are panels that
there's always
that
binning.
That,
Exactly.
So,
but whether that binning is the 30% that have failed, or is it the 70% that they bought but just aren't up to snuff?
But Apple, another way that Apple always eats first, right? That's Andy, you made
Apple
the point
eats first. I love it.
So often it's like, well, we made all these panels and we made 1,000 panels and Apple comes in and says, we'll take these 600. Yeah. And where do the 400 others go? They go everywhere else, right? Yeah. They go to that LG panel, LG also eats first because they made them, but that's what you see in a Dell panel or something else. And that's been the case for a long time too, that Apple likes to be at the front of the line for that stuff.
So we have 2 choices for show titles. It could be Apple eats first or suck it, Intel. We'll decide at the end of the show. The big story, according to the press, was the increase in services. It was a very smart move for Apple to start focusing on service revenue, and it has been steadily
and it takes
climbing.
And it takes a long time to do that. This isn't something like, oh, we need to make more money, let's go do that right now. I mean, if you look at this takes years and years and years to slowly build up all of these services, make sure that each one's working before you, or mostly working before you open to the next one. So you could tell that they knew that this was going to come, where they needed to keep buffering. They need to keep pushing that iPhone, part of the pie down, and I think you're going to keep on seeing them look for all the opportunities they can to get that thing down to less than 30%.
Yeah. And that's something that a company that's worth that much money, they've got the financial punching power to hold on like that. Even Google, like the joke every single quarter with Google's call was, okay, how many hundreds we've got great news about Google Cloud Services. We had our best quarter ever. We only lost $400 million because this has been years and years and years of not only developing technology and finding clients, but actually buying real estate, building out facilities. And this quarter was the first time it was actually good news that we actually made hundreds of millions of dollars on cloud. And so once you clear that hurdle, you start to get to the point where now most of what we do is it's like the joke about the first pill. When you develop a pharmaceutical company costs like $1 billion, but every other pill after that is nothing but profit. And this is Apple's going to be making more money per dollar they put in now after this for their cloud services.
You talk about the long game. This is one of those cases where 10 years ago, I think they started talking about services and saying that our goal is to reach some financial goal that they blew past in a very short amount of time. But you see this here where it just keeps going up. They talked about the number of subscriptions they've got, and that includes like subscriptions in app as well as theirs. It's not just Apple TV subscriptions, but this quarter they passed 1 billion subscriptions. And if that doesn't impress you, it's up 15% year over year, and it's doubled in the last 3 years, the number of subscriptions that they take. And that includes in-app subscriptions. It's not just Apple. Apple views that as its entire ecosystem, right? But still, you get the sense like this is why the services growth is so huge. They have laid this foundation. And as they also point out, they see a lot of growth in the install base. When we talk about like reselling that old iPhone, that if the old iPhone stays in service and somebody buys a new iPhone, that's one more person using an Apple device. And so their total number of devices is increasing, which allows them to sell more services to every single one of those devices. And it just keeps on rolling.
Yeah. And in the Q&A, Luca pointed out that one of the advantages of services is that it's consistent. It doesn't keep fluctuating up and down. Once they got them, they stay got.
So much of the hardware business is seasonal,
right.
but services is not, because once you subscribe, you're on that subscription, and that's where it is. Also very profitable. The Apple set a third quarter record for its profit margin this quarter. Luca Maestri very proud of that. An analyst was like, "Luca, I noticed that the profit margin is pretty high, maybe the highest we've seen." And he said, it was one of those moments of like, "Oh, I'm so glad you noticed." Yes, it was 45%. It's just enormous, and the reason is the hardware profit margins are less. They're good. They're about as good as you get in the industry, but they're not services profit margins, which are huge. And so the more services are in the mix, the more profitable you are as a company.
There's one service that has 100% profit, and that's the money that Google pays them every year for the default search on Safari. It's estimated now that it's $15 billion. Apple made about $83 billion last year in services. $15 billion is a big, significant portion of that. Not that that's in jeopardy, although every once in a while Google kind of complains about it. But Google is not going to stop paying that money.
Well, I mean, they're making money on that, right? They're making so much money that they can pay an affiliate fee to Apple for it. Yeah, for sure.
I guess there is always, though, the risk with services that they could get their percentage cut, as you were referring to, or is it the EU could say you have to stop, letting Google be the default, something like that. There's always threats to this, all regulatory though, not commercial, all regulatory threats.
Yeah, and really Apple's, I think that we're going to keep on seeing the situation that regulatory issues and antitrust issues are Apple's number one problem in the next decade.
Those are the headwinds.
It's not going to be competing with anybody else. It's the fact that they're starting to pull away.
Yeah. iPhone still is the lion's share of revenue, although services is number 2, which is interesting. Then wearables. It's kind of sad for me that Apple, which was the Mac company for so long, a computer company, that Mac is a small percentage, not much more than iPad, actually, of their overall revenue. But they're not getting out of either business, I presume.
Well, but you look at it, you got to keep in mind how huge the iPhone business is and how huge the services business is becoming. Because if you look at the Mac, it's still doing, it's still like a $30 or $40 billion a year revenue business.
Well, I'll take it then. That's okay.
It's huge. It's just not huge compared to the iPhone. This is the challenge for the Mac and the iPad, is that they're never going to match the iPhone. They're just not. They're never going to match it.
Yeah, and also anything running a desktop OS. I think that's one of the most volatile categories of all, because when does somebody decide that they need to replace their laptop or their desktop? They're not dropping these things in toilets unless it's quite deliberately. And and so much of the job of that device is being taken up by the new tablet they buy, by the new phone they buy. So that's just life on planet Earth in 2023.
The line chart you made for Apple regional year-over-year growth tells the story that we were talking about, India and China. EMEA includes India, so that's the yellow line. The red line is China. The green line is Americas. And while it went up a little bit, it's been trending down for some time. So, and China really is growing rapidly. Is that all phone? I guess it must be.
No, it's not. I mean, the phone is their way in, but Apple has said repeatedly that in China, one of the things that they consider the most encouraging is that the phone becomes a gateway, and like 2 or 3/4 of all the Apple Watch buyers this year or this quarter were brand new to Apple Watch.
Oh,
and it's an iPhone accessory, right? So that's one way you get them to buy that second Apple device. But they have said in past quarters too that China keeps setting records for Mac sales, all-time records for Mac sales and all-time records for iPad sales. And so the narrative, at least, and there's some data to back this up, is that people, like we saw here with the iPod and then later the iPhone, you get that one Apple device, and that is a crack that they can like push into and get you a whole bunch of other Apple devices once you're sort of like in their ecosystem a little bit. So it sounds like they're doing, I mean, again, it's never going to be the iPhone, but that there's a real opportunity for them in China with their other products too.
Anything else that we learned, whether from the analyst call or the numbers themselves? Any other insights you want to share before we move on?
Not necessarily insights, but I think there's only one question about Vision Pro. I was surprised that it didn't appear in part of Apple's opening comments. That oftentimes the opening comments of a tech company's quarterly call are about waving the flag on projects that they think are high profile and a source of like company pride. Wasn't there. An analyst asked about it. Said, "Oh yeah, no, I'm using it every single day." Tim Cook said he uses it every day. Again, they won't say what Apple TV program that he's watching on the Vision Pro every single day, because that would probably be the reason why. But
well, and I think that there's nothing to until it starts to ship, or until you start to see developers put out more tests. There's really not. They've kind of.
There's nothing to say.
Yeah,
they've shot that powder. There's nothing I think new to talk about until they have something to show.
Yeah.
They haven't shown.
Not that there would be an announcement, just that it's interesting since we spend like all of like the past 2 or 3 weeks reading every single analyst call. It's oftentimes a way to see, well, why did they decide to use some of that time for the CEO to have open comments? What it really is like when you are watching to see. In the old May Day parades, who is standing right next to the Soviet premier, who has been moved to the outside. We get an idea of where the power is. So it was just kind of odd, given that again their environmental initiatives, their social initiatives were enough to spend several sentences on that. At least not. Oh, we're very proud of our new innovations that are coming in the future, such as blah blah blah. I just thought it was notable.
I will read the quote. Tim Cook said, "There's enormous excitement around the Vision Pro. We're excited internally. Everybody that's been through the demos are blown away, whether you're talking about press or analysts or developers. We're now shipping units to the developer community for them to begin working on their apps. And we're looking forward to shipping early next year. We could not be more excited with that." Here's the funny sentence, though, the interesting one. "I'm using the product daily." Do you think he straps on the Vision Pro every day?
Like Andy said, is he watching just the new dailies from the Apple TV show that's being worked on that week? Or
well, and also
they bring those in.
Is he doing that at home for fun, or is he reviewing where things are going? So you have, there things bubble up to
Tim.
To
it's time for your Vision Pro briefing. Strap in.
But, yeah, I mean, it's not real. I mean, like they could say, like this is what numbers is going to look like in Vision, or this is what. Hey, we've got something for you, and for him to just constantly see that progress.
I doubt he looks at the iPhone 15 daily. Maybe he does. Here's the
it's
latest
probably in his
samples.
pocket, so he probably does
he
look at
uses
it
it every
daily
day.
because it's in his pocket.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, to Andy's point, I mean, I think they did, having listened to a lot of these calls over the years, I think they did what they needed to do for a brand new product that's been announced and isn't shipping, which is it got a paragraph in that opening prepared remark that the CEO says, and they don't really have, they could have mentioned the developer stuff, but they did the thing about, we announced this thing and it's amazing and it's going to blow you away and it's the most advanced thing ever made. And
that's all they have
and then
to
they
say.
just moved on to the rest of the stuff. The one, I don't know if it qualifies as an insight, you can be the judge, that I had of this is that they always talk about how proud they are of the fact that, like I mentioned, 3/4 of Apple Watches were sold to new Apple Watch users. Slightly more than half of new iPads sold were to people who'd never bought an iPad before. Slightly less than half of new Macs sold were to people who never bought a Mac before. It's something to boast about. They're growing their market. That's nice. But it struck me that when you have a situation when your existing install base doesn't need to upgrade, that's when those numbers go up, right? That's when the numbers are of switchers or people who are new to the platform go up, because the people who are not buying are people who already bought your product last year and don't need to buy a new one because it's an Apple Silicon and it's great. And why would I update? I'll see you in 4 years. So it's a nice thing to boast about, but it's also kind of a proxy for how many people are buying a new Mac who already have a Mac and are upgrading. And if that number of new to Mac goes up too much, that means nobody's upgrading, which is not great either.
That's an excellent point. Yeah.
And again, I think, it comes back to the fact that a lot of people don't feel like they need to. They don't feel like they need the newest version because the software, the tools are vastly outstripped by the hardware. There's just not a lot of reasons to upgrade. Right now with a phone, the primary reason to upgrade, everyone looks at what is the camera going to do? What's the new thing with the camera? And then they make a decision about whether they upgrade. I don't think there's very little on the phone that gets people excited more than just looking at the camera update.
Well, Mark Gurman says he knows the date the iPhone 15 will be announced. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. You're watching MacBreak Weekly. Andy Aiko, Alex Lindsay, Jason Snell. I want to tell you about a brand new sponsor and a brand new product that I just started using that I'm blown away with. We talk to people all the time about photos. It's very important to everybody, keeping track of your photos. And we talk about maybe the third-party services that you can keep your photos on. I've started using Mylio, and I am blown away. Mylio. It is now where I store all my photos. I've been looking for a digital asset management tool. I used to use Lightroom, and I put all my photos in there. But I don't really want Adobe to have all my photos. They're really pushing me to keep them under the Adobe cloud. I back up to Google Photos, but again, Google's getting all my stuff. iCloud, same thing. I didn't have a really good way of managing all my photos until Mylio came along, and this thing is amazing. First of all, completely offline. You decide where you want to back up, how you back up. I have it backing up to my Synology NAS. You can back it up to iCloud, or you could back it up to Google Drive, or you could back it up to a OneDrive, but you can encrypt before you back it up, so they don't get access to it. It's yours, right? Or you could just use it on every device, and that's the other way I use it. I use it on my iPhone, my Android phone, on my Mac, on my PC, everywhere. It's the solution to optimizing and preserving your digital legacy, absolutely free, and has all the features you want of these cloud services without being in the cloud. For instance, it automatically recognizes all the different things. I can say, I want to see all my pictures of bridges. Boom, it's done. It automatically recognizes all the people. Now, I did go in and tag the people that I want to keep track of, and now it's going through my photos. I have more than 100,000 photos there now because I did Google Takeout, and I was able to bring in all my photos from Google Photos, all my photos from Flickr, from Instagram. Everywhere my photos have been spread out all over the years, all in one place, my Mylio Photos app. It makes it easy to organize, edit, and manage. By the way, not just photos, it has OCR built in. So you can do documents, too. I have it import my documents as well. And the OCR means it's very quick to find any document you want. You could put videos, yes, of course, and you're not paying for storage unless you want to. So don't hold back. With the power of AI, it's analyzing everything and giving them smart tags. So instead of you going through and creating folders and manually, laboriously tagging everything, it does it all for you. I don't know if you were watching Ask the Tech Guy. Somebody had mentioned the screensavers, and I wanted a picture from the screensavers. I just typed in Yoshi, and boom, it showed up instantly. Thanks to Mylio. I love it. I didn't have to fumble through libraries, look in different places. This is my new. In fact, I just went and bought an external hard drive because I want to have everything in there. I want to have everything. Older documents you thought were lost. Update them right through the Mylio Photos app while keeping the original intact. OCR is built in. And by the way, everything I just described is free. You can also go with a subscription plan, the Mylio Photos Plus, which I did immediately. And now all my devices connect in one library, no cloud storage required. So on my phone, I have all my Mylio photos, and you have complete control of it. You can say, I want it to be just thumbnails. I want it to be just optimized images. No, I want to store the originals. You have complete control. It'll even tell you ahead of time how much space that's going to take. And with offline storage, I don't need to rely on the cloud to keep files accessible through devices. I can also create new backup systems. No, they're secure. Mylio even has its own solution. But I have to say, this is nirvana. I finally found it. Don't wait. Preserve your digital legacy today. Get Mylio Photos for free today on your computer or mobile device by going to our special URL, mylio.com/twit. Plus, as one of our listeners, you're going to have access to special offers for Mylio Photos Plus. So download Mylio Photos for free right now. Go to Mylio, M-Y-L-I-O, mylio.com/twit. And you'll get some special offers, too, for Mylio Photos Plus. Mylio.com/twit. I'm telling you, if you've been looking for a solution where you could store everything, not have to worry about privacy, have all of the smarts that these other services offer, all of the AI on device, this is it. Mylio.com/twit. Very impressed with what they've done. I think you will be, too. And it's free. No reason not to try it. All right, let's talk about the iPhone 15. Mark Gurman says it will. Now, I don't know how accurate he is. I think he's probably projecting rather than from an informant, but it's a reasonable projection, the kind we make every year, that Apple will have an event probably on the 12th or 11th and ship the phone on the 22nd. iPhone 15. Hey, that's coming up. That's about a month off. Woohoo! The 11th is a Monday, the week after Labor Day. This is why I think he's coming up with this date. It's the first opportunity Apple could do it. The 12th is a Tuesday. Labor Day is on the 4th this year, so you're not going to do it on that week.
And Apple has done it in the past that week, but
that's
it's
true.
Probably unlikely that they have, but they have done it right after Labor Day. It's a really expensive thing to do because you have it's probably less expensive now because you're playing a movie, so they could probably put it. It's a lot more portable. In the past, when it's been something that was a live event, anytime you do a live event anywhere, you end up with a lot of crews, and oftentimes a lot of those crews are union, and there's all kinds of rules about what they're getting paid over the weekend and on Sunday and definitely on Monday. And so usually when you see people do a day after Labor Day, you're like, wow, they're big spenders.
Alex speaks as if he knows what's the details.
No, I'm just saying.
No, I know.
I do a lot of Labor Day. I've done a lot of Labor Day events.
Exactly.
And I, over the years, about 10, 15 years of Labor Day events, I haven't had a Labor Day off in a long time. Anyway, so.
But it costs you. And I think that's reasonable.
But it's really expensive. Yeah. You always have to explain to clients that it's like, that's going to be, 2x the labor cost that you'd have before. So usually they move it out.
So the 11th, 12th is the kind of thing you would say, we would say, even just kind of looking at the calendar, that's a reasonable place.
Yeah, it's a reasonable place.
I don't know. I mean, it's reasonable, but it's not the pattern. The pattern has been Labor Day week for the last few years. So this is
he says, I think he does have a source. And I'm looking at the actual Bloomberg Power On newsletter. He says, I'm told. So he does have a source. Will go on sale around September 22nd.
Also has a source. So there's a second report from 9to5Mac that also says the same thing, which is, I think they said the 13th. Mark says the 12th or the 13th, which
not the 11th.
A Wednesday.
The 12th or the 13th.
In the past, they've done the Wednesday events only when the Monday is a holiday.
Right.
So if they're doing it the week after Labor Day, I would think they'd do it on the Tuesday, the 12th, but who knows?
And again, because they're playing a movie, it's a lot less. I mean, there's so much less moving parts.
They just got an invitation list, right? They got to get people there, and
So they've got to give people time to do it, and so then they look at also the travel against those weekends as well. Of press has to come in. Do they want to put them into a position where they have to all fly during a really heavy zone? So
look for your invite on Labor Day or the day after, September 4th or 5th.
Probably 2 weeks, right?
Do they do 2 weeks now? Jason's the only one who gets an invite.
Sometimes
I don't get any invites.
If it's in person, it's 2 weeks usually.
2 weeks.
It's my observation of when Jason gets an invite. And I go, wow, it'd be really great.
Well, if it's 2 weeks, that means you'll be getting an invite probably in 3 weeks on the 28th or 29th.
Yeah, we're getting closer.
So everybody in two MacBreak Weeklies, just look deeply into Jason's eyes and see.
It's not a secret. It's not a secret.
It's usually on X. It's Twitter X, whatever.
Whatever we call that
Twix.
thing. Twix.
Yeah.
I like that.
Twix.
Oh, what? Twix. It's perfect. Thank you, Andy.
And there'll be another lawsuit. They get sued for one name and then they move to another one. They're like.
It's adorable. You think that the CEO still actually thinks more than one step ahead of us.
I think settled on. We know the iPhone was manufactured in its tests. That a manufacture for real will begin any day now. So we pretty much settled on what we think the iPhone 15 will be, right? No?
Yeah, we're looking forward to a more periscope camera, maybe better
on the Pro
technology
on the Pro model.
On the Pro,
and that's the one that matters, right? That's the one where they make the biggest. Everything then trickles down from there.
So the iPhone 15 nothing will be kind of the iPhone Pro 14 Pro Max of today, ish. And then the 15 Pro will be whatever the next thing is, and that's the thin bezels and the titanium frame.
And maybe curved back, better upgraded camera, maybe a periscope camera. I mean, this could be the one. This could be a substantial upgrade, more than the last couple of years. That is the thing that Apple always looks to get those results back up in the stratosphere.
Because the Pro will have a 3 nanometer processor, probably, right? The A17.
Yeah.
That'll be maybe not the iPhone 15 nothing. That'll probably be the last year's processor, right? And
don't forget the bezels are going to come in by a noticeable amount too. So it does start to feel like, it's going to be a substantial update. It will be a bigger update than the last 2 years for sure. The question is always, will that be enough to motivate people? Because that is how Apple always takes their results to the next level, right? We talk about they almost did, whatever it is, 90 or 80-ish billion dollars when it's not the holiday quarter. But, 3 years ago, they were in the 60-ish range. And then they do a new iPhone that's substantially new and everything just kind of goes up and then plateaus again. Yeah. So this might be that phone that they're hoping will drive lots of new sales, lots of new customers. It's starting to shape up that way, though. I mean, the rumors are not that there's a couple minor changes. I think that Pro phone is going to be substantially different than the last couple of years of Pro phones.
Yeah, and we're also all on giant hooks to figure out, is this going to be the release that has USB-C instead of Lightning? Yeah. Or are they going to hold that up until next year?
Don't we know that? I mean, it must be.
I think it'll be this year.
Yeah.
Everybody's saying that's this year too, yeah.
There's some leaked images online that supposedly shows here's a component that has the USB-C charger in it with what looks like an updated bottom frame. This is the point which looking at pictures like these gets tricky, because it is close enough to a launch date that you would expect that the chain of secrecy has to sort of be broken in order to just get hardware into people's hands that people need to see at this point. But it could still just be, hey, you're someone who's trying to get clicks. But yeah, I mean, Apple seems to have thrown in the towel on USB-C charging, so why not sooner rather than later?
Yeah. That would be, it's funny. That's one of the upgrades that might be controversial because people have so much investment in Lightning.
I don't know. I don't know if I was thinking about that last night. I was looking through all the cables that I have laying around now, and I'm almost all USB-C. I have a couple odd. Even my like watch charger is going to a USB-C outlet. I mean, the USB-A feels really old. I have 2 lightning cables that I travel with. Because when I'm traveling, I really am clear, like, what do I bring that I need? And so I've got a couple lightning cables. And so I really, I think Apple has hung out for quite some time, but my entire infrastructure now is USB-C, not lightning. So I don't know if it would impact as many people as it would have 2, 3, 4 years ago. It would have definitely impacted a lot of people because a lot of devices were still on that. But I think that as it drags out, a lot of us have already put USB-C into everything else.
It's just super weird for them to have USB-C iPads and USB-C MacBooks and make, this one device is why we absolutely must have Lightning. I feel like the fact that the adapters are all USB A or C already, and that really this is a cable swap, makes this potentially a lot less painful. Yeah. And so many people have collected USB-C devices over the years that I just think, there will be people who will complain, and there will be people who bought hotel chains that bought, like they did with the dock connector, all these plastic things that have a lightning thing in the center that's perfectly set. That's like, well, you can't use those anymore. But I think this is going to go down a lot easier than the last one.
I still go to hotels that have clock radios with 30-pin docks on them.
Oh, yeah, me too. I think going to a non-proprietary connector, right? Because the dock connector went to the Lightning, and so it was not something you had around. You had to buy it when you went to Lightning. USB-C, not everybody, but like lots of people have USB-C devices already of various kinds, and so they've got those cables laying around. So it's not quite. I just don't think it's going to be as big a thing. But yeah, certainly some mid-list stand-up comedian is going to have a tight 5 about how annoying it is that they lost their Lightning connector. It's fine. Like, what's next? USB-E? And, whatever.
Well, you just wrote the routine for him, Jason. Good job.
Was not hard. Yeah, that wasn't the tight 5. You got to expand a little bit of there. You got to work in some color.
No, all you need is that.
I was with my kids at the hotel, and I'm trying to play some music on the iPhone, so my kid will fall asleep. I was like, geez, what's this connector
Seinfeld
here?
already has 4 pages of yellow pad notes on his bit.
I'm just surprised at what they put in hotel. I'm in a hotel room right now, and I'm surprised that I'm like, there's still a TV. That's so quaint. Like, I don't remember the last time I turned the TV on.
Oh, but nowadays the TVs have a Chromecast on them or AirPlay on. I mean, they're getting a little better where you at least can tell your device can tell the TV what to play. Some of us like big screens.
I never think about it. Yeah, I just when I'm traveling, I guess I'm quite happy with my iPad, and I just turn it on, and it's really. The problem is the quality of the color on the iPad is so much higher than the TV.
I'll tell you what the thing is. You're traveling alone, because when I travel with my wife, I need a bigger screen so we can. We're not going to lie in bed. We have, and it's no fun lie in bed watching a laptop or an iPad. We have done that, but I have to prop it on a pillow. It's just not. I think
when I'm traveling so much, I get in from whatever I'm doing, and then I go to sleep. And then I get up and I start
you
doing
work
again.
I play.
Work or it's at these kind of events. We got.
You're exhausted.
I'm here with a friend of mine, Fred, who's one of the top surveyors in the world, and we went down to the bar and we were sitting there talking, and this guy next to us just kind of hanging out and having his drink, and I asked him what he does. He looked like he was a trucker or something, and he goes, oh, I'm here at this conference called SIGGRAPH. And I'm like, what do you do? And he's like, I do the virtual simulations for the lunar lander for Artemis.
Wow. That's cool.
It was so cool. And what would happen was then my friend Fred, he's a surveyor. And so the two of them go into this discussion about ellipsoids and, the moon is normally spherical. And Fred goes, well, how do you handle the coordinate systems? And we're talking about, there's all these coordinate system discussions, and it's much harder to land on the South Pole. And because you have to do this long ellipsoid to stay in that orbit, and it was just like this incredible. But so when you're here, I could do that, or I could be up here watching TV. So that's how I usually look at it. It's one of the few
I would probably stay on the show floor a little bit long.
Yeah.
Apple is testing an M3 Max chip, also according to Mark Gurman. You start seeing these tests as Apple builds these devices. They go on Geekbench and stuff, and it's kind of a leak, really. Model codename J514, a MacBook Pro high-end. The central processing unit of the M3 Max, according to Gurman, has 16 main processing cores and stand back 40 GPUs. This is according to test logs from a third-party Mac app developer that was seen by Bloomberg News. There's the disclaimer. I should mention 48 gigs of memory.
Yes,
All of
this is your MacBook Pro. This is
with a Max in it.
It'll be in the studio as well, but like probably this debuts in a MacBook Pro
next year.
14 and 16 refresh next year. Yeah.
Very likely next year, not this year. Right?
Yeah. The M3 may not even be this year, but if it is, it'll be end of the year and it'll be the base model again, right? Like it'll be a MacBook Air, but probably, I think Gurman's report suggests it's probably something that's not going to be here till early next year.
4 more high-performance CPU cores, 12 in total, and at least 2 additional graphic cores, 4 efficiency cores. So, that gives us some insight into what's coming, and not surprising. I think the real unknown is what kind of performance jump the M3 will be from the M2. The M2 was a incremental jump from the M1, but because we're going to a new node, I think maybe this will be a bigger jump. Yes.
Yeah, I just think it's harder. It's getting harder for Apple to explain. Here's why here's what will entice you about this new family of processors over the previous one, because it's not like the iPhone 14 is going to be one less as good as the iPhone 15. It's like, okay, but this is going to be there is a version of the M3 that's not going to be relevant for you if you already have an M2 Pro. It's going to be really, really hard for the messaging on this.
But I think it's also not just an upgrade from, the previous M1s or M2s. There's hundreds of millions of Intel Macs out there. And the question is when does the pressure point, build to a point where, wow, it's time for me to move on to a new computer. Same thing with the iPhone. It's, you're not looking at trying to just get people to upgrade from a year or two ago. You have all these hundreds of millions of iPhones that are 5, 6, 7 versions deep, that you have to market to. And I think that they, as you keep on making these upgrades, you keep on adding that pressure to, this might be my time to do it, because I think also a lot of people have learned to wait until I other than Mac Minis, which I just kind of consider like they're just going to be what they're going to be. I buy every computer the week after it was announced. Like that's, I just wait almost always, unless we absolutely need something, we just wait. So those release cycles and showing that there's some improvement is also the big push for that quarter to keep people moving forward.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So I think normal consumers spread it out. That's why probably the laptops, there's not so much urgency, because normal users aren't buying desktops so much as laptops, right?
And I think we still keep on going back to the fact that, these computers are so much faster than the last ones. I think that getting people to upgrade from M1s and M2s to M3s and M4s are going to be really hard, because, what are you doing with that computer that makes it worth it? And I think people aspirationally wanted to move there, and they saw a huge jump, and you do see a huge jump from Intel to M1. But once you're in the M series, that gets a lot more complicated, just because there's not a lot of software. If you're not doing graphics, if you're not doing video, if you're not doing some hard number crunching, there's not many things that are going to go any faster with a new machine.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty darn happy with my, I think it's an M1 Studio. I don't feel any urgency, but for some reason I do always buy the new laptop. I don't know.
Well, the things that get you aren't, and this is so true, like Alex says now, that it's not the new processor usually. The new processor is great and it will come with you. And for maybe if you're a MacBook Pro buyer, it means more, but like the MacBook Air is their top laptop. What's going to, the new design drove it. New colors can drive it. A better upgrade to the display or the webcam, reduce the size of the bezels, add a different, it ends up being more about the gestalt of the computer and not the power, but some other collection of features that pushes you over into buying a new one, I think. More likely than back in the day when it used to be like, oh, this computer's so slow, I need a faster computer. It's not really like that now. It's about like all the accoutrements that make up the product.
And I think also, as much as Apple would like to get rid of every plug that we could possibly put into that computer, for me, peripherals are a big deal. Like, the Mac Mini Pro is got a lot more lanes and a lot more, USB connections. And there's a lot of us that are filling those up, and they still do a good job at connecting everything. And so I think that's the other thing that you look at as you start to, as those ratchet up. And I think that Apple could do better in that area, to be honest.
Okay. We'll see.
Yeah, Alex, I wanted to ask you something. After reading some stuff like NVIDIA announcements from SIGGRAPH today, like how much pressure is Apple going to get from a company like NVIDIA that can basically bring all the graphics horsepower that a lot of professionals need, particularly for AI and for VR, and also allowing people to say, well, here's take $8,000, build whatever version of whatever feature-rich Mac Pro you want to build. It won't run Mac, but at least you'll be able to access it with NVIDIA and this other ecosystem. Is that really significant for Apple?
I don't think Apple has any pressure because they can't compete with those with those desktops. So like the Mac Pro is not going to do what those NVIDIA desktops are going to do. AMD's talking. I mean, there's rumors that AMD's got 96 cores coming, for some of their CPUs. These are big machines, and these machines are. And I think this is where Apple, I think, did a pretty smart move in the sense of. The new Mac Pro tops out, I think, at $12,500 or $13,000. Yeah. They're not trying to build a $60,000 machine because if you start penny for penny, starting to compare them with these big NVIDIA, the cards, the computers, the same thing with the AMD solutions and the next Threadrippers and the HPs, those are playing a different game. And the reality is that game is really small. Like it's a really small number of people. It's growing. It's a really profitable business for NVIDIA. It's a profitable business for AMD, but it is a very vertical business. And it's really not Apple's. I think that's just not where Apple goes anymore. I think that the Mac Pro does a great job of, really handling 95 to 99% of the market that they're aiming at. But there's definitely things that I would use a PC for, these really heavy photogrammetry, NeRFs, those types of things are going to be, really hard, a lot of big rendering, those kinds of number crunching things belong. I mean, right now, I think they really belong on a PC, for the really, really big solutions. I think that Apple is not going to be competitive in that area. I think that they can do a good job for, again, 95, 99%. I think it's the 1% at the top. I think they've just decided, when I looked at the Mac Pro, which I think is the right way to go for Apple, is they just decided to cede all of those really heavy, all that heavy lifting to someone else for a market that I think is too small for them to really pay attention to.
Sure. I was reading about the Grace Hopper super chip that they announced, and I'm like, just going on, not as someone who uses this as a practical way, but someone who just looks at specs and looks at like the RAM that they're using, the way that they've architected this. It's like, wow, another reason for me to be confused as to why people spend more than X $1,000 on a Mac, because it just seems like like you're saying, it seems like it's a very, very esoteric world in which above a certain level of performance, it's not building one computer that is this performant, but having a need for, no, I don't care about this aspect. I need the fastest RAM, or I need the most amount of RAM I can possibly get in here to run these models. So it's just why I keep being confused about above. I'm good up to about $4,000, $5,000. Once we get above that, I'm like, I have lost the ability to know who's buying a Mac Pro at this level. Well,
but I think that Mac Pro, there's a lot of things. I mean, number one is it runs this operating system called Mac OS. And so that there's a big number of people that want a lot of power, and these people are going to be doing medium to high end, not the ultra high end, but medium to high end graphics work. They're going to be doing very high end video work. I mean, there's nothing that you really can't do with up to 8K video. I mean, we start talking about 16K video or something more maybe, but really up to 8K video, this is tuned for that. And I think for some, general scientific work, I think it's tuned for that. So I think that it is, it's the same thing with Final Cut. If you look at that process, is when you start talking to the Avid editors about what they want and what they need to have to switch over, it's so fiddly, like all these little things that no one's going to use. And when you give them all those features, they're still going to use an Avid. so the thing is that, so there's no upside for Apple to go into that market in the same way that I don't think there's an upside. The specialty approach that NVIDIA is taking, that AMD is taking, that a lot of other ones are taking in these really high end solutions. And we're seeing a lot of that here on the floor. I mean, NVIDIA and HP and everything else. That's a world that I think Apple's got a lot of engineering to do for the rest, the 95% or 99% that's out there. And I just think they've let that go. And I think that the last Mac Pro was not letting that go. It was going to to 60,000. It's just not. It's but now I think it's stopping at 12,000, and I do think that all those cards, all the lanes that you have with the USB-Cs, all of those things are huge advantages. So why you'd still buy $12,000 machine.
I think there's not too much of a threat to Apple in the content creation sphere, but the biggest growth sphere right now in computing is AI, and Apple has no position there at all. I mean, that's what the Grace Hopper.
Yeah,
that's why NVIDIA is making the Grace Hopper is for AI.
The numbers are crazy. These are like $30,000 cards.
Yeah.
And, these really, those.
It's not for the. It's not for the average end user, and it's probably a small market, but it is a hot market, right?
It is.
Look at NVIDIA's stock.
Oh yeah. No. It's a great market for NVIDIA. I just think that Apple has not proven to do really, really well in really vertical markets. And I think that it's also just a really hard clientele. That also has a lot invested in NVIDIA. That's another real challenge there is that NVIDIA has a lot of processes that a lot of the software, a variety of these software tools are dependent on the RTX, or they're dependent on these things. They wrote to that code base. So it's not just, it's not competing apples to apples. They have something different that everyone's written to already. So they're really serving that built up market.
Yeah.
Is it relevant to wonder about the halo effect, about how, yes, this is a rarefied, the Grace Hopper is a very rarefied air chip, but perhaps another generation will see the relevant features of that bubbling down into Apple's actual target users?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah,
maybe. They do in some cases because everyone's buying these NVIDIA and AMD video cards, and so it does trickle down. The fact that it has that has already got a trickle down effect that goes through that. I think in the same way that Apple isn't necessarily going to go after NVIDIA's market, I don't know if NVIDIA really wants to go after Apple's market. Consumers are fiddly people too, in different ways, and they're like, I don't understand. Why doesn't it just work? Why can't I just hit the button? And the engineers, the people who were doing Bitcoin for a long time had figured out how to take their graphics card and hang it from a wire and plug everything into it so that it could cool better. This is not the average Apple user. I'm going to pull a piece of it out and I'm going to hang them all through there so I can blow fans through it in China. The fact that the interesting thing here is that what NVIDIA is doing really well, and we're seeing this here at SIGGRAPH, is they are making the jump because, I was in some discussion. We were talking about how great it was that Bitcoin had cooled off because now we can all finally buy graphics cards again. And AI would have a really hard time. ChatGPT, Midjourney would all have a really hard time scaling right now if Bitcoin was at 60,000 a coin, or 100,000 a coin. All the AI we see right now may not exist, because you just couldn't get the processors to do it.
It's actually happening already. In general, there's already, again, shortages of these high-end platforms because of AI. So
processing. Even these giant processors that are really expensive. I saw a slide this morning on one of the keynotes for NVIDIA. It's a giant processor, and it goes, they can do 100 images a minute.
Right.
This is super expensive. It can do 100 images a minute. That tells you how
big these images are.
Computationally expensive these images are. Yeah, absolutely.
Let's take a little break. Apple is making an investment along with other companies in a chip designer, maybe because they don't want to give up this space. We'll talk about that when we come back. Andy and Aiko's here from WGBH in Boston and IHNATKO.com, which is any day now. You're going to probably open that up when Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk do the cage match. You're going to have a special kind of maybe live blog there.
We've got foreign investment in place. We're just waiting for EU compliance checks.
It's just a matter of time. And I like to tease you about it once in a while.
I'm getting that you're enjoying this. I'm getting that clear and simple. Don't worry about it.
No, okay. I'm sorry. I don't mean to. I don't mean to take pleasure out of your pain. I apologize.
Again, It is a thing that I strive to complete. It's hard to complete, like when you have like deadlines of people who will be very, very upset if something isn't done on the day that you promised it.
It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. You do it at your pace. Nobody, when Michelangelo was painting the Sistine ceiling, Pope Julius kept saying, "When will it be done?" He said, "Give me a chance, man. I'm making a masterpiece up here." It's like that.
At least people are still like bugging me about it. Not like, oh, well, we've just simply accepted that we're never going to see the last book in the Game of Thrones series. You can take all the time you want. We know you're never going to write this.
Patrick
Rothfuss, I really am.
Patrick Rothfuss, you could just give up. It's okay. We're fine. Sigh. Also with us, of course, from 090.media, but more importantly, officehours.global. Well, more importantly to us, not to him. Alex Lindsay. Office Hours is rocking it as always. And if you want to get color charts, 6colors.com's got them in every color of the rainbow.
I bought a lot of color ink. We didn't want those black and white charts like you see in other websites. No. We went for color. Because it's in the name of the site, and I'm like embracing the name of the site. I spent good money on that domain name.
Is that a Tickle Me Elmo over your left shoulder there?
It's a Giants Elmo bobblehead, actually.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
That's right. Throwing I haven't taken him out of the box yet, though.
What's that on the other side of it? The brown thing. What's that?
Next to it?
Yeah.
That's the Stanford axe. That's the Cal-Stanford rivalry.
It is. It's an axe. I see it now.
It's not the actual axe. It's a replica. I did not steal the axe. Probably.
You can tell so much about people.
It's a replica.
I think he's running the double bluff, frankly. I think some sophomores are going to be ransacking
Elmo.
Our show today brought to you by ZipRecruiter. We love ZipRecruiter. If you're hiring, it can be incredibly hard to attract top talent if you don't have Apple stock options to offer them. It's tough. And it's, with the current labor market, it's harder than ever. That's why you want a partner who helps, who gets it. ZipRecruiter. It's what we use. ZipRecruiter knows how tough it is right now, but they've figured out solutions for all the problems, all of them, that you might be facing if you're hiring. See for yourself. You could try it right now for free at ZipRecruiter.com/MacBreak. How does ZipRecruiter help you tackle your recruiting challenges? Well, as an example, how do you get that top talent? Well, first of all, they're out there, right? So you want to go to ZipRecruiter and reach out to the broadest possible audience, 100+ job sites, with one click of the mouse at ZipRecruiter. Okay, good start, right? You're casting a wide net. But still, they're out there. How do you get them to apply to your listing? Well, this is the cool thing. ZipRecruiter goes through all those resumes, more than 1 million current resumes on file, picks people whose capabilities match your requirements, then sends them to you. You can review them. You can pick the couple that you like and then invite them to apply. I'll tell you what, you go right to the top of an applicant stack when you invite them. They're flattered. They're pleased. They go, oh, this must be a good company. They see my value. That's another way to move ahead in the line. Also, ZipRecruiter has great little tags you could put on your listing that immediately tell people, yes, you can work from home here, or yes, benefits, or, you add those tags. That is another way of raising your post to the top. I think ZipRecruiter is the best. ZipRecruiter's pricing, very straightforward. There are no surprise costs. You will know what it costs before you post. And right now, you can post for free. Team up with a hiring partner who understands what you need. We love them. ZipRecruiter, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Just go to this exclusive web address to try ZipRecruiter for free. ZipRecruiter.com/MacBreak. You post now, you will probably get a great candidate within 24 hours. We usually get it within a few hours. It's amazing. ZipRecruiter.com/MacBreak. ZipRecruiter is the smartest way to hire. Thank you, ZipRecruiter, for supporting our little show here, our little bitty Mac show here, the little one that we do and have been doing since, what are you shaking your head at, John Ashley? Since 2000, when did we start this? 2005? 2006? Somebody asked me the other day, who was that guy that was the rich guy that was a bird photographer that was on, and Merlin Mann would make fun of his yacht. Those were the days. Scott Bourne. Yeah, those are the days. In fact, I even found the episode. I think it was Monocle Pete's Yacht Wax was the name of the episode. Were you on then, Andy? Were you on with that crew?
I don't know. That
was predated you. Maybe
that could be BA. Yes.
Yeah, it was like it was episode 64 or something. It was in the first year. First 2 years.
I think I've been around long enough that was a meme that I had to learn.
Yeah. I know you were, Alex, because you started this show back in the day.
I think that we did the first. I think that the first video version was 2006, and then MacBreak Weekly I think came after that. So I think it might have been 2000. We had some what we call MacBreak minutes that I think we did in 2005.
Right,
and so those were like these little short.
That first one
tips
was at Macworld Expo in 2004, January. Right, or 2005.
I think it was 2005.
It was January 2005 with iJustine and me and
No, Justine wasn't. I think Justine was not until the following year. And so I think she was 1 or 2 years behind that, but we had Emery Wells and Amber MacArthur.
That's right.
I think we're the four.
It was Amber. So, I remember that. And of course, Emery Wells has gone on to fame and fortune.
He's done okay.
He founded Frame.io and is now sold it to Adobe. Who did he sell it to? I forget.
Adobe for $1.2 million in cash.
Billion. B with a B. Yeah. Don't Emery says that's a B. I'm in the 6 comma club. No, don't forget it. I never hear from him anymore. I don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Before you get jealous, it was in nickels and unrolled too. So
yeah, well, he can afford the yacht and the yacht wax, so we're going to give him the Monocle Pete's Yacht Wax for. I think all the guests of MacBreak Weekly get Monocle Pete's Yacht Wax as a consolation prize. Apple and Samsung lining up to invest in ARM. It's sad. The story of ARM is almost sad in a way. Apple started ARM back in the Newton days. They were looking for a RISC processor that they could use with good battery life in a portable device. They sold off their stake some time ago. SoftBank owns it now. SoftBank's been trying to divest forever. First, they tried to sell it. That didn't work. Then they tried an IPO, I think, and now they're selling stakes to their customers: Apple, Samsung, Nvidia, and did I say Nvidia? NVIDIA and Intel, all buying stakes in ARM. I don't know how big Apple's stake will be, but Nvidia tried to buy it for $40 billion. So imagine, it's worth a little something. And it is in Apple's interest because ARM, they are they architecture licensee for the ARM processor.
I think they all want to have a seat at the table. They all want to benefit from using it, and any of them buy it, and it ends up being antitrust. I think that's
that's
issue.
why NVIDIA couldn't.
That's how NVIDIA,
basically,
This is based on a report from Nikkei, and it says that they're not necessarily looking to sell the entire company. They're looking to sell single-digit percentages to sort of stabilize what the company's about. So yeah. And you're absolutely right. This is all about it's not about these companies trying to get together and bond together to save and celebrate this. They would like to any one of them would pay for it individually, but if they don't go in together, then no one can own it. So
when the NVIDIA deal was scrapped February of last year, they paid ARM more than $1 billion in the breakup fee. So they're already kind of all in on ARM.
Well, and I think that for any major user of ARM, if everybody else goes in, you have to go in. So there's not really a lot of choice. Otherwise, you potentially get left out of important decisions.
Right. Another investment from Apple that's interesting. Luca Maestri is trying to spend a little bit of its cash holdings. They're buying servers for AI from Foxconn. What I did not know, this is an Apple Insider story, is that Foxconn sells a significant percentage, 43% of all AI servers worldwide, to OpenAI, the ChatGPT creators, to Amazon Web Services, to NVIDIA. Foxconn is obviously building these servers to somebody's spec.
What does that catalog look like?
I want that. Yeah, let's get that catalog. I'd like to buy an AI server. please. Tim Cook has said that Apple's working on AI and has been for years, and that machine learning pervades everything it does. But of course, it doesn't have a public-facing AI solution, unless you count Siri, which no one would use the word intelligence and Siri in the same sentence.
I'd rather that be less public a little bit.
According to the South China Morning Post, Apple has ordered an unknown number of servers for the training and testing of AI services. They'll be made by a Foxconn division called Foxconn Industrial Internet, built in Vietnam. Foxconn, already Apple's biggest supplier of servers for their data centers. And according to the South China Morning Post, Foxconn accounts for 43% of the server market globally, which I had no idea. So they're making them.
That is interesting because it kind of points to either the privacy that they're seeking, to be able to say that we are taking this completely in-house, both for their own industrial like IP reasons, but also if they were to launch any service or any feature enhancement that relies on a server-based AI product, they want to be able to say that, no, we're not using Google Cloud. No, we're not using any others outside. We're not outsourcing any of this. This is all stays within our purview and within your original privacy agreement. But it also means I wonder how much this is just knowledge that they can't continue to grow their model without having this kind of resource, versus they actually want to launch this as a real thing. Because remember that a lot of this is the bakery for an AI model. Once the model is cooked, they won't necessarily need computing hardware of this scale and magnitude to have it working on either their own local servers or to have this running even on future Apple products and devices.
We don't know how many servers or how much it will cost. Although Pixelbud says that Apple's investment in ARM was an arm and a leg. So maybe this is equally expensive. More ways to spend the Apple dollar. You have the story, Jason. So I've been watching, if you look at Apple TV, if you use Apple TV, apparently Lionel Messi is the second
sports
coming.
In it.
Holy cow. There is more Lionel Messi on my Apple TV than anything else. This is their Major League Soccer investment. Did they have a hand in bringing Messi to, where'd he go, Jersey?
They did Miami, and they did, which he likes because there's an Argentinian community there, and it's pretty, it's easier for him to get back home as well. But part of the deal was the league. It's not just the clubs, right? It's the league and Apple all reportedly made a deal where Messi actually will get paid, at least in part, based on how well MLS subscriptions do. That he is going to get a little piece. He's got a little piece of the upside of MLS, the MLS season pass that Apple sells. And that was one of the sweeteners in the deal. Just like they made the deal for Beckham, where they basically said, we'll give you an expansion team, which is the Miami team, which Beckham is a part owner in now. So they're motivated to sweeten the deal for Messi. And now they're promoting the heck out of it. And which leads us to the story you're going to talk about, which is Apple trying to buy into American college football. And actually sort of sweetening the deal to the point where it almost worked, but instead it didn't.
Apple offered the 9 remaining members of the Pac-12 conference. So are they going to call it Pac-9? A 5-year deal?
No, wait for it. Pac-4 now.
A 5-year deal with an annual base rate of $23 million per school. That seems like a good amount of money. I'm reading from Jason's article at 6 Colors. With incentives based on projected subscribers to a Pac-12 streaming product like their MLS League Pass. However, it didn't work out.
It didn't work out. So they sweetened the deal, but what they want, and this seems to be Apple. So what can we learn from this? Apple's model with sports rights seems to be different. Most sports rights, you literally just write a check and say, we will give you money to the NFL or whatever. They don't want to have an upside downside relationship with you. They want you to pay them. And Apple doesn't want to play that game. So Apple with MLS, there's obviously, it's a partnership. And this Pac-12 offer they made was, and they sweetened the deal, but they wanted there to be upside that they were participating in with the conference. The conference would need to support this. And if the conference was successful in driving subscriptions to a season pass product, Apple and the conference would benefit, and the schools in the conference, which is so unconventional. But there were 3 teams in the conference that were talking about leaving to go to a conference that already had basically given them guaranteed money if they switched. And Apple sweetened the deal enough that they said, okay, we'll take this deal. We'll take this deal. However, there were a couple other teams in the conference who didn't love the idea of Apple basically saying, we're not guaranteeing you this extra money. You're going to have to work for it. And so they, at the last minute, basically went to the Big Ten conference and said, we'll take less money. Please make us an offer. All you have to do is beat this Apple deal. And the Big Ten went to Fox, the TV network, and said, do you have an extra money for Washington and Oregon? And they said yes. And at that point, everybody left. And all that's left in the Pac-4 right now is Cal and Stanford and Washington State and Oregon State.
That's so depressing.
And the question is, so will they try to rebuild and bring in some new schools and sell something to Apple? Well, maybe, but it won't be for this. But in the end, from an Apple perspective, look, as a Cal person, I am devastated because this is the end of my entire life of being a sports fan. It's all gone now. It just evaporated on Friday. It's gone. It's over. This will be the last year. And then whatever it is, it won't be this anymore, the thing that I grew up with. But from the Apple perspective, I will say we learned something here, which is Apple's got all the money in the world. We said it. Apple's got $40 billion in the bank. They can do whatever they want, but they're not willing to write the big check because they seem to believe philosophically they want partners who are going to benefit with them in the success of the product they're trying to build. And with MLS, they have a partner. With the Pac-12, that's what they wanted. They could have said, we'll just give you $30 million a school and walk away. And they refused to do that, I think, philosophically. And I think the question is that the future of sports rights negotiations? I wonder, with all of these now direct to consumer products that are out there, streaming services, I wonder if what we just saw is the first example of groups with sports rights being told, I'm not going to write you a blank check, right? You need to participate in the success or failure of this. And I would not be surprised if that we see this repeat itself over the next decade as the economics of sports TV work themselves out. But regardless, I think Apple basically got the ones that were sitting on the fence to come back in. And then the two that said they were solid are like, we're not actually solid. And then they were out and the whole thing was a house of cards and it collapsed.
There is a temptation to say that Apple destroyed the Pac-12.
I mean, you could say that, but they're not a charity, right? They could have saved the Pac-12 if they had offered more, but they didn't think it was worth more. And, there are plenty of villains here. Fox is a villain. The Big Ten is a villain. Oregon and Washington are villains. USC is a villain because they started this. But the truth is, money talks. And right now in college sports, the only thing that matters is football TV money. Apple wants to play in that game. For people outside the U.S., people who don't follow sports, American football is number one, and college football is 1A behind the NFL in terms of money. And huge ratings and huge money.
And college games are the ramp to professional games. So if Apple's able to show, here are all the features that we could add, and these are all the things that we could make it cool and everything else, then the next time the NFL comes around with a contract, Apple's not going, hey, we haven't done, Amazon kind of came in from nowhere to get Thursday Night Football. And the first year wasn't perfect. It needed a little work to kind of work out some of the kinks. On the streaming side, mostly just on, not so much the production, but just on getting the infrastructure ready to go. So I think that this is, I think NFL doesn't want to do too much of that either. So having a team, being able to show what those features are, especially as you have the Vision Pro, you have a lot of devices, you can start to show why it would make sense to do that. And I think that's part of what.
And the original
deal, it was
going
to be a relatively bargain priced and West Coast conference, so it's going to be close to home for Apple. There were a lot of things as a test for them that this would have been a good fit. But clearly they were not willing. They, like I said, they sweetened their deal by $2 million guaranteed per school, and that got the Arizona schools and Utah off the fence and saying, we will stay. And they came on Friday morning to the meeting and basically said, okay, we're here. And then everybody looked around and said, wait a second, where are Oregon and Washington? And that was the end of the whole story. But so they kind of closed the deal in some ways, but what they would not do is just say, forget about being our partner. We're just going to write you all checks for $30 million a year. They were not willing to do that. And that's interesting, right? Because they could, but I don't think they want to. I don't think they like doing business that way.
Also,
I think you're
understand
right.
that the original negotiation wasn't that Apple would have all the rights. There was a rights package that somebody else, was it ESPN probably, that a broadcaster had in conjunction with an Apple offer. And Apple might have had more, interesting technological stuff.
But there was ultimately no final offer there. That one sort of fell by the wayside.
Yeah, because the traditional guy dropped out. So now Apple's saying, Apple's trying to save the deal and saying, oh, well, we could do it all, but you're going to have to help us a little bit.
Well, and it sounds from the reports that I saw, the Sports Business Journal report about this, that obviously the universities are very concerned. They want high profile games on TV, right? Because those are how you recruit and how people discover your university. And if it's all locked behind a paywall or behind a streaming app, that's not as good. And so it sounds like Apple basically said, we will try to do what we did with MLS, which is license some of our games back to ESPN or something like that. But we're not giving you any guarantees about that. We're going to have to negotiate that and see what it's like.
Are these conferences,
that gave them pause
for
too.
People who are listening and very confused, and I am one of them. Are these conferences like the leagues of in European football, like the Premier League?
It's a league. It's a group of universities that have the control of TV rights to their sports, and usually the one that's most valuable is football,
and usually geographically nearby. Right? There's the SEC. Yes,
traditionally, although that has basically fallen apart in the last couple of years because there's a huge land rush right now because the conferences, they're too big. I mean, the short version is they're two big conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten, and they are basically powered by Fox and ESPN, and they are headed for, in the 2030s, the creation of essentially two semi-pro conferences that take all the money and they will pick out all of the schools that don't really matter, and they'll be left with like 32 schools and you'll say to yourself, well, what does this has to do with school? And the answer is nothing, other than that some of that money goes back to those athletic departments to fund other sports. But it's a huge business that's worth a lot of money, and so all the kind of traditions are breaking apart, and you end up with university presidents who on one level are very stuffy academic types, but have somebody in their athletic department basically saying, look, we can't turn down 30 or 40 or $50 million a year. Can you imagine what that will do? Ironically, most of that money will just go back into the football team and not to the students or even the other programs. I mean, the big sports tragedy here is that so much of the U.S. Olympic team and many other countries' Olympic teams actually come out of the Cal and Stanford programs that have full Olympic programs. They're the most successful college athletic programs for non-revenue sports. And where did that revenue come from? A conference that no longer exists. So that's not going to be good in the long run for America's Olympic sports, but it doesn't matter because, again, football is the TV money and the money talks.
Joe Reedy,
Apple tried to play in that game and didn't make it.
Joe Reedy's headline in the AP kind of says it. Pac-12's downfall came after it could not adjust to changing media landscape. Yeah. That's taken kind of the Apple point of view.
Yeah, they also took, the other part of it is they turned down an offer from ESPN last year, and they anticipated a better offer. And we all know what happened, which is Netflix had that bad quarter. Everybody freaked out. It suddenly became a place, streaming no longer was a place where you invested money. Instead, you were trying to save money. And that put a chilling effect over the entire sort of TV industry. And so they turned down ESPN, and ESPN did not come back to them, essentially, or came back to them for almost nothing. So they made a huge miscalculation. If they had known then what we know now, they wouldn't have done it, obviously. But I think there's truth in the fact that pure streaming sports rights are going to be terrifying for leagues and conferences, and everybody's watching what MLS is doing with Apple, right? Because that is MLS just took the plunge, and they are the they're gonna show everybody what the issues are with taking your product and putting it on a streaming service.
And they had the least to lose and the most to gain.
Yes.
Like they're so there's a lot of upside for MLS and very little downside.
Yeah, they seem real happy.
Yeah,
well,
I think they're doing okay.
MLS does cover production costs. So this is where Apple was emboldened by the new deal. So Apple did a deal with MLS with escalators based on subscriptions. MLS covers most of the production costs. They try to do the same thing with college football, and it didn't work out.
And Pac-12 has their own production system too. All the leagues do, though. The future of these sports leagues may end up being a streamer
just do their own thing.
Buys the rights and say, NFL, you produce the games for us, and that's it. And the NFL does it instead of CBS or NBC.
Pac-12 had one of a state of the art. Like when we say they have, their coverage, especially for the non-revenue generating sports, they had to get the cost down. And so Pac-12 has, they used to have a downtown facility in San Francisco, and all of those schools would send the raw cameras back. So they didn't even have, they didn't have all the production there. They had these little trucks that were designed for it. You throw out six cameras on triax, you send them all back over internet too. They all come back. Sometimes the announcers were there. Sometimes they were in San Francisco. Sometimes they were at home. They're doing all the replays and everything else out of San Francisco. And it was very, very efficient. I was surprised when I saw that things were coming apart, but those things what they became efficient at is not what makes money.
It's interesting to watch how Liberty runs F1 Motorsports, because Liberty is a broadcaster, right? It's John Malone's company. And so it's really interesting to watch. I was just watching the race a couple of weeks ago, and the announcers were in England, and while the race is going on in Spa in Belgium. It's fascinating how that's done.
The backhaul for F1 is just insane.
And what F1 has done that's smart in America, because they didn't have big broadcast deals in America, they've got their own streaming that's far superior. I can watch so much more in so many different ways than I can do on ESPN. But I guess we're willing to burn ESPN by doing that, because ESPN can't be happy. Although the numbers are going up and up.
They own that entire pipeline, and it's just a really, really. And
I subscribed to F1. I used to watch ESPN. I subscribed to F1 TV because I could see every driver's point of view. I can hear the driver's radio. I mean, it's a very different. It's exactly what you were talking about, Alex, when we were looking at MLS. All the technological things you can do now are remarkable.
Yeah, it would be really hard to get broadcasters. There's a handful of places where you see kind of unlimited money being spent on figuring this out. Not unlimited, but very close to it. F1's one of them. NFL, sometimes the NFL is working on things for years before you see it. Like the pylon cameras that you see all the time now. They were sitting there. They were like, oh, that isn't good enough, or we're tearing, or something else is going on for years.
Really?
Trying to figure that out. Yeah. And so, if you look at the project, just the first down lines that pop up, and all the data that looks like it's sitting on the field. If you look at any replays of like old games only 10 years ago, it's kind of a mess. It was just, it wasn't very good. And now they're doing them with like moving cameras. It used to be, it was all these cameras, only a certain number of cameras were able to do that. And so, but that's the NFL doing that. That's not the broadcasters. Right. Like the NFL is investing that money, and you need people I
think Jason's right. That's the future, is that these companies, these sports leagues are going to produce their own video and sell rights to a streamer, but they're going to be. So it looked like the college presidents or the negotiators were just a little chicken. Apple. This is what AP says. A person familiar with the Apple deal told AP the guaranteed yearly payouts were $23 to $25 million per school. And then there were escalators based on subscribers, as you mentioned. 2.5 million subscribers, the payout would go to $30 million, which is pretty close to what the Big 12 payouts are. If they reached more, 3.7 million, it would jump to $50 million per school, which is very close to the SEC and the Big 10. It would put these Pac-12 teams in the same arena as the biggest college football teams. Was that an unreasonable number, 3.7 million? Maybe they thought
I don't
they
think
could do
so.
it.
No,
But I think the university presidents are so weird, and I think they're super risk averse. They're not immediate negotiators. I think this was probably a pretty great deal. Also, there's a larger issue. In the end, Apple did close the deal. I mean, Apple closed the deal with the ones that were doubting, and the reason that it all fell apart is an extraneous reason, which is Oregon and Washington are looking at the big picture of where college football is going, and they want to be on the bus that gets them to survival into the 2030s and that NFL 2, essentially, that the college conferences are making. And the way you get on that bus, the Big Ten is the bus, right? The Pac-12, even if it survived another 5 years, is not the direct line to ultimate, super college football money. And I think that was the reason that they fell off. So in the end, I think that they were skeptical of Apple not giving them guaranteed money, but I think it's an excuse. I think the truth is Apple sweetened the deal enough that they got everybody else to sign on, but the two biggest names realized they could cut themselves a better side deal. And you know what? If I were them, I probably would have done the same, but that was the net result is that Apple sort of gets blamed, but I think Apple came through with the people that were the most skeptical, which was the Arizona schools in Utah. They were there on Friday morning ready to vote for it.
Yeah. The other issue is one that Apple can't solve by itself, which is linear TV, broadcast television.
Yeah.
And a lot of the presidents, a lot of the schools said it's important to our athletes. It's important for our teams that they're on TV. That if they're not on TV, they're not going to have a national exposure. They may not get the NFL contracts.
Right.
And Apple could not offer that.
Apple didn't insist on an exclusive deal, but because this all happened so quickly, I think Apple said, we will try to sell games to a partner on broadcast, but we can't guarantee it. That was not in the deal, right? They didn't say, we've got ESPN lined up. They're going to do all these games on Saturday nights. It's going to be great. Winner. They did not do that. And so, I agree. I think you have to have both. I think the future of sports on TV is a combination of big marquee matchups that can go out to huge audiences and generate lots of commercial revenue, and then niche stuff that's on a streamer. I think you got to be able to do both.
Everybody wants to watch Jason Snell run on the field and steal the axe. It's just the way it is. No, we want to. So in fact,
I'm going to hide in my Oski costume, the mascot, and then run onto the field and steal the axe. Yes.
ESPN and Fox apparently, according to the AP, weren't willing to pay what Pac-12 was looking for, so they weren't getting the linear deals they wanted. Apple was offering, I think, a fair deal, and you can't blame Apple for not paying more. But it just it's greed and
Apple
fear and all the other things. It fell apart.
And I also think that Apple wanted to show that model works. That's a great model for them to prove that it works. Like, hey, you have to work at it a little bit. We need some help on promotion.
And by the way,
there is a huge upside.
It was only a 2-year deal. It wasn't the 10-year deal that they made with MLS. They said you could walk away after 2 years.
Right. It was a 5-year deal with an out after 2 if they didn't want to do that.
So there wasn't even a big commitment.
Well, the thing for Apple though is that's a pretty sweet deal. You get a whole bunch of people to subscribe, and now you got a whole bunch of people in the mix, and that help. There's a lot of tangential stuff. So when they leave, they'd go find something else. But Apple keeps maybe not subscribers into that specific vertical, but they've now potentially brought more people into the ecosystem.
It's really interesting to see how streaming, and Apple in particular, has changed what we consider TV. It's really a very different deal these days.
It's really going to be interesting to see as we watch the strike. I'm here in LA, and so everyone talks about the strike or the strikes. And the issue is that Apple and Amazon are playing a different game than everybody else. Everybody else is trying to figure out how they make money with this, and Apple and Amazon there's a lot of ways they make money at it. And it's going to be really interesting to see specifically how those two compete in these markets, because Amazon got a little bit of the NFL. Apple's got MLS and is obviously trying to get more, but they can play that game, and it's not clear that the other streamers can afford, that rich of a game.
Yeah, it's interesting when you compare it to just quickly when you look at what we've been talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks about like Goldman Sachs and other makers, where they did a deal with Apple in which Apple gets to get most of the benefits, and they negotiated away most of the risks. And it's interesting to see them how Apple has to negotiate when, no, actually you can't dictate to us exactly how we're going to deliver the service. You're going to convince us that you're a good partner for us, and you're going to do it in a very, very demonstrative way.
I don't know if you saw the Tetris movie on Apple TV. It was quite a good movie. Turns out, maybe its provenance wasn't so good. Dan Ackerman, who's editor-in-chief of Gizmodo, wrote the book in 2016 called The Tetris Effect, the game that hypnotized the world. He is now suing Apple, the Tetris company, and others, saying, "You adapted my book without paying me." He said he sent his book to the Tetris company in 2016. He alleges they copied it for the movie and threatened to sue him if he pursued his own film or television spin-offs. Ackerman is asking the court for 6% of the film's $80 million production budget, and it sounds like he's got a pretty good case. We'll see. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I did read the book, and I kind of assumed that they licensed it, or at least hired him on for some reason.
There are scenes that are specifically from the book.
Yeah,
right?
and the entire approach was the reason why that book was so good was because it didn't just say, "Hey, nostalgia nerds, remember Tetris? Here's the wacky story." No, it's like I'm gonna write a Cold War thriller that just happens to center around Tetris, and that's there's a reason why, like when Sweeney Todd got adapted as a musical by Sondheim, like the central conceit was inspired by a stage production that came out 3 years ago, and it was important enough to say, yeah, we're gonna have, even though like this is really the only thing we're taking from this, we're gonna have to license this or else we're gonna be in big trouble. So yeah, that's pretty weird. But another thing I noticed is that, remember that like in streaming, if this had been released as a real movie, there would be like box office numbers, so they could say, hey, this movie generated X dollars for the box office income. We want a percentage of that income. But with streaming, because they don't say what the audience numbers are, they can't possibly detail like how much money they made. The only metric they can use to say, here's how much the value of your theft has to contribute. It has to be, well, we know that you spent this much money on, so we're going to ask for a percentage of your actual production budget, so you can't get out of it that way.
Yeah, that's a smart thing to do, and I have to think he's gonna. This is a pretty strong case.
There's gonna be a lunch.
Yeah. Good luck, Dan. I hope you do well. Finally, Google has announced a new way to write apps for the iPhone and Android and everything else. Project IDX, an experiment to improve full-stack multi-platform app development, says Google. Launched August 8th, and it allows you to do cross-platform. In fact, the browser is actually the host of the IDE, which is really interesting. And they're offering AI, so it'll write some of the code for you.
Yeah, this is a really interesting development, because one of the things that we've been talking about for a long, long time is, when will you be able to build and deploy apps directly from the iPad? Because the iPad seems to be muscular enough now that you can actually do that. Why can't we use this as a development environment? So this is right now, the platform is designed for building web-based apps. But they are saying that the future direction of this is to build in emulators for iOS, build in emulators for Android, and essentially be able to use this cloud-based environment, meaning anything with a web browser will be able to run it, to create binary runnables for basically any platform. So you build it once, you don't even have to build it locally, and now you can deploy this on multiple platforms. It won't be built on, it won't be like the Xcode environment by any means. And I'm certainly willing to wonder how much of can you write an equivalent app in Xcode versus an equivalent app in this thing? But when it comes to simple apps or a service app, writing it one place, not having to have your entire team have Mac Pro grade hardware, and be able to contribute to this code base, generate with AI, and basically build this one thing that could be deployed anywhere. That's super interesting, particularly for students, I think.
Works in Python, Go, uses Angular, Next.js, Flutter. So it is pretty agnostic as to the tools you use. Yeah, very, very interesting. It uses the Cody AI to generate code. IDX.dev. Google has just launched that. Does it cost money?
You have to sign up for it right now. So it's not, that's going to be, I think that's a future plan. They just announced this today, so I haven't read in depth about it. But I do know that it's invite only right now. I do believe that in the future, they're trying to use this to promote their own like ad deployment platform. So I'm sure that it's a way to tie that in. Also, they're making sure that they're saying that, yes, we have AI, but please don't use any of the AI as a cut and paste sort of solution. This is just, don't trust any of the code that this platform gives you.
Andy, I'm gonna save you a week's worth of social media mentions and just point out you can use playgrounds on the iPad to submit apps to the App Store. They are of limited capability, but there is a path there. It's just not Xcode. So
good catch.
Probably similar.
I don't regard
actually.
playgrounds as
yeah. Very interesting. I must apply to the waitlist because I'd love to play with it. Would these be PWAs, progressive web apps, or on the iPhone, or would they be you'd open your browser and run them? How it sounds like it's browser based. Yeah.
It sounds like the first release of this is to design PWA, basically anything that will run inside a web browser, with the added buff that if you're running it on an iPhone web browser, it will look like an iPhone app or will look like an Android app. But they're explicitly saying that the end game for this, sooner rather than later, is to actually generate application packages that can be submitted to the various app stores.
Very interesting. Thank you for, I'm glad you found that. Thank you for sharing that with us, Andy. And I will be following.
It'd be interesting to see, like, if it's good enough. One of the things that's interesting about that is the PWA enough, for that, because then you're not going through the App Store.
Right.
Ooh, yeah, and Apple's kind of got an incentive to support that, because then they can go, Your Honor, we got PWAs, Your Honor.
If it's good enough, but not too good. Like, if it gets too good, then you have everybody putting all.
Apple's been a little slow to support it, but at the same time, Google does, Microsoft does, and Apple does have some support for service workers and things in Safari. I would love to see Apple fully support PWA, and the only reason they would do that is because then they could say to the EU and others, hey, no, you can always do that. That's what Steve Jobs said in the beginning. You don't need an app store. Just put a website out.
Well, and oftentimes Google is really good at playing the foil. I mean, Apple would be in much, much, much deeper water and much, much hotter water if Android didn't exist. I mean, this would be a disaster for them. Yeah. So Google's done a lot of good for Apple.
Yeah, I've always thought that that's one of those things that Apple says oftentimes that could bite them in the butt, which is like, now when they said, like, their defense is, well, if you don't like our App Store rules, just write it as a website. We're not going to limit like a web-based app. I think based on the idea that, well, of course, something that's running inside a web container will never be as sophisticated and powerful and as useful as something that's written with our own code development tools. But as we've seen, like in 2023. Oftentimes you kind of have to ask yourself, given that this app, even if it were an iOS app, would require an active connection to the internet, why are we bothering going through Apple at all? Why don't we write our Kindle app so that it is in fact a web app? It can store things directly on the device. We'll be able to allow people to make purchases through the site and install them without having to leave. We won't have to pay a dime to anybody. Facebook could say, well, actually, if we did this as a web app, again, it would look as soon as people hit the app, they could say, oh, by the way, put an icon for this right on your desktop and use it just like any other app. And all of a sudden, like, Apple is not quite so is not getting all the jazz they're getting from having these native apps. It's there. I think the benefit is that I think these developers, they do want lower level access to all the sensors and lower level access to everything that's going on the device. But there could be a day when I do write the apps for myself on occasion. And most of the apps that I write could be simply written as web apps without having to like put something provision on my iPad or anything like that, because I'm not writing the next greatest word processor. I'm writing a gadget so that every time that there's a cough or a pause or something in a podcast recording, I can touch a button and it's automatically creating like an edit log for me. That's not really sophisticated.
And if you are thinking of switching to Android, my flip phone from Samsung comes tomorrow. I'm going to do an unboxing on Twig for the Galaxy Flip 5. Google has now published an ad to reassure you it's all good, man.
I'm worried about switching phone. Who's keeping my data? If I'm worried about making a switch, will I still be able to access the cloud?
Oh, I know about
Spam
that.
messages? What if I'm
And just to make sure that they're agnostic,
Yes.
they show some other
That's
companies'
coming from the
phones.
video.
Yeah.
I was saying those alerts are coming from the video.
Oh, yeah, by the way, yeah, that's not you. It's me. It's not you.
All good with Google on Android.
It's all good with Google on Android, even if you have a Samsung flip phone. So, all right.
Yeah.
I'm reassured.
There's a set of 3 or 4 of these. And I'm also wondering how much of this was oftentimes when a company like Apple or Google makes deals with device manufacturers is that, oh, by the way, and we will also, as part of this contract, commit X dollars to promoting this issue, doing something that will help you to sell more of your devices, even though it's not ours. So I'm sure that there was some sort of collusion saying, oh, by the way, as they're talking to Samsung, we will make sure that we're spending money to make sure that Apple people know that, yes, you can make a lateral move like that without like having to torch your entire social media profile, all your contacts, all your calendars, all your photos.
Yeah. Let's take a time out. Get ready, gentlemen and ladies. No, there's no ladies here. Your picks of the week coming up in just a second. I would like to put in a little bit of a plug for our club TWiT. Maybe you watch our shows and you're tired of advertising. Maybe you would like to see us develop new shows. Maybe you'd just like to get a little bit of Aunt Pruitt's time critiquing your latest photography. That's all part of Club TWiT. We announced Club TWiT 2 years ago. Happy to say 8,000 of you have joined. Thank you. $7 a month. It's very affordable. There's a year plan, $84. There's a family plan. There's corporate plans. You get ad-free versions of everything we do. You get special content we only offer in the club, including shows like the Untitled Linux Show, Hands on Macintosh with Micah Sargent, Hands on Windows with Paul Thurrott. We have the Giz Fizz with Dick D. Bartolo. We just launched Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson. Brought that back thanks to club members who subsidized that. Some of those shows will become part of the TWiT family of public shows at some point, as This Week in Space did, if enough interest is shown. But what's the beauty of having the club is that we can try this kind of stuff. It helps us keep the lights on. The money does not go into my pocket, I can assure you. It goes to support TWiT. twit.tv/clubtwit, please. Become a TWiT by joining, and thank you in advance. We really appreciate it. I would love to have every one of you be a member of the club. There's a lot of great stuff going on in there. Let me just see. Ant is always adding new events. Oh, we got a photo walk coming up at the end of the month. I'll be at that. Stacy's book club also. Her new book is the book we're talking about is Anne Leckie's Translation State. That fireside chat with Daniel Suarez and Hugh Howey, that'll be something. And again, these are club only. We'll probably put it on the stream so you could watch it live. But if you want to watch it after the fact, September 7th, 2 p.m. Pacific, you'll be wanting to join the club. Lou Maresca, our host at This Week in Enterprise Tech, is doing an Ask Me Anything, another fireside chat coming up with our AI guy, Anthony Nielsen. He's our creative, and he is incredible. Just some of the many things going on. It's like a country club on the internet. You provide the swimsuit and towel. twit.tv/clubtwit. Thanks in advance. All right, let's start the picks of the week off with Jason Snell, Mr. Six Colors.
Well, I had to do a bunch of transcriptions on the road last week for this Apple analyst call. And I have a whole bunch of things that I built up I downloaded things from GitHub that did the OpenAI Whisper model, and I wrote a shortcut and all of that. I'm on the road with my laptop and I'm like, oh God, can I get it all over here? Can I translate it? And the answer was no. I just bought a piece of software because there are 2 Mac utilities that actually have integrated the Whisper C++ framework thing that is great that you can download for free. If you pay a little more money, you don't have to use the command line, and then they'll let you export to whatever format you want. So there are 2. The one that I have used is MacWhisper. And then the other one is called Aiko. Aiko's in the Mac App Store, and it's actually in the iOS App Store as well. MacWhisper is at Gumroad, and you can get both of these. Basically are using the same OpenAI Whisper model. It's very high quality. You can reduce the quality for speed. The medium quality is still very, very good, but the high quality is kind of mind-blowing, and the medium quality is good enough as well. So if you ever are in a position where you need to transcribe some audio, if you're comfortable doing the GitHub and command line thing, go ahead, by all means do that. You can do it and it's free, but you might want to pay a little tiny bit of money to go the extra mile. Because I know I recommended Whisper as a model last year. This year, I'm saying, well, you may not want all of that trouble. You don't need to. Somebody, in fact, more than one somebody have written a nice app shell around all of that. So all you have to do is pick an audio file, press the button, and it'll generate a very good transcript. And this technology is only going to get better, but I used to type the Apple analyst call, which is an hour long, by hand.
Yeah. So did Micah. Micah used to have to do that. I think Serenity used to have to do it.
Serenity
too.
And I, in fact, our big innovation was we had a shared Google Doc and we would time shift. So I'd be doing the first 15 minutes while she was doing the next 15 minutes. And then I would jump to 30 and she'd jump to 45 and we would kind of interleave it. But all that's out the window. I mean, and I've been using AI transcription for a while now, but this Whisper model is so good. It is the best I've seen. And so you can't edit the transcript in these apps. You just export the text and then you can edit it somewhere else. I think the ultimate is going to be when you get a text editor that's got the transcript in it, and there are web apps that do this now, but they don't do it with Whisper. So I want that one to come together and have the great model and let me sort of click anywhere and hear the audio that underlies it. That's coming if it hasn't already been added to some of these other web services. But this keeps it all on your Mac. Nothing leaves your Mac. And so you can just do it anywhere, even if you're traveling somewhere on the road and don't even have a good internet connection. This will work.
Do you have one you prefer?
MacWhisper is the one that I use. Aiko, I just discovered. I had a friend who uses it. It seems to only have the large model, which is the way they put that is they prioritize quality over speed, which is fair enough. The large model is very good. The medium model, though, is so close that if time is slightly of the essence, the medium model and MacWhisper lets you choose any of the models. So
interesting. All right, and that's €20 for the base single license MacWhisper Pro.
Yeah, I think it's free for the basic super simple model, and then you pay for the access to the higher quality model.
We pay a lot for transcriptions for our shows, and we signed the deal right before MacWhisper Whisper AI came out.
Yeah, the challenge is the big challenge with these models is speaker detection. I have yet to see a good thing that unites speaker detection with this transcription, because that's what you want. You want it to say Leo said this, then Andy said that, and that's the next frontier. I imagine by this time next year they will have that solved, and then I won't have to say this is Tim, this is Luca, this is Tim. I won't have to do that anymore.
Does it say speaker 1, speaker 2, so that you could do a global search and replace?
No, Whisper doesn't do that, and there are some hacks where people run it through two different things, a speaker detector and Whisper, and then unify the time code, and they're getting there. It's almost there, but it's not
I'm sure it'll be there any day now. That sounds like a simple thing to add. Says Leo, who knows nothing about how hard this would be to do. Good pick, MacWhisper or Aiko, AIKO. You take your pick. Speaking of AI, I gotta give a little credit to Anthony Nielsen. I mentioned he's our AI guru, and I think you might be interested in this. Alex, I know you're all over Midjourney. Did you know there's a new thing called FullJourney? Also a Discord group. I'll put the links in the show notes. It generates music. It generates speech in a variety of people's voices, sound effects. Yeah, of course it does image gen as well. It's I guess an extension of Midjourney. It's called FullJourney. Here is a deep fake.
Your lives as you have known them are over. Resistance is futile.
It does have, it looks like a watermark on these, but still, I know you're a big fan of Midjourney, so Anthony just told me about this. I haven't had a chance to play with it. Yeah, it's very fascinating.
Yeah, I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah,
no, absolutely.
Yeah, FullJourney on the Discord. I'll put a link in the show notes. Your pick, Mr. Alex.
That looks really interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm here in LA, and I realized that there's there's a store I like to go to almost every time in LA. And I thought, I was just there over the weekend. And if you're in LA, Filmtools is the geekiest place that you can find about filmmaking. And I just love going in. I went in again with my friend who had never seen anything like Filmtools. And we're just walking around. I was like, well, this is what this does. And you cannot believe how many little weird things you can use to attach to a car or to a thing. And these are the pro tools that you see in the movies. Nice. This is just a place like when you're like, oh, I need some,
I need
little
gaffer's tape. Or some C38s, C47s.
There's a whole wall of gaffer's tape. There's the different thicknesses and different widths and different all these things. There's an entire wall of gaffer's tape. So yeah, you're in the right place. And there's like a whole section just for weird audio tools, and there's cameras in the back, and then you've got some lights, and you got a whole section for Pelican cases, and they have all this stuff. And it's just one of those places that especially when I'm in Burbank. I was in Burbank for this event, and so I was only about a mile away, and so I spent about an hour in there wandering around, spending too much money, and just finding little bits and bobs of things that I needed to add to my camera for the shoot that we're doing.
You're in Mecca for filmmaking. I mean, this is it's a company town.
Yeah, it's a really great little it's a great space, and so there's other places that do it, and I definitely go to different this kind of thing in most major cities is somewhere, but Filmtools is still my favorite. And so if you're in LA, it's just, even if you don't do filmmaking, it's worth just looking at all the crazy stuff that is built just to get your camera into just the right place. It's really fun.
Very cool. Filmtools.com. But go to LA, go to Burbank and do it. That's where you get your
there's literally
Sticky Joe's stuff. Joe's sticky stuff.
There's literally a section just for the suction cups you use to attach your cameras to cars. There's like a little whole section, and all these different ones. There's some with pumps and some without pumps and some with long things, and there's a little rigging that goes with it. It's pretty fun.
Oh, I love it. And a lot of this is on the website, so you can go right to the suction cup.
I do buy a lot of stuff on the website from them. It's just fun.
Oh yeah, you want to see it all in person. Yeah.
It's great. It is great. There's all those are all there. I
want a Delkin Fat Gecko dual suction cup mount. You got one of them?
I gotta tell you, those suction cups, when they're on, they are part of your car. Like we
needed those when we put my Hero Pro on my Mustang, and it fell off. And the truck immediately behind me ran over it, and Jerry came to me with the pieces and said, "I'm sorry."
I did the same thing with the Theta. I put it on the front, right in the middle, to get like a 360 of me driving, and the suction cup handled it just fine. But it turns out the Theta can only go about 55 miles an hour before the quarter 20 on the bottom fails, and it bounces off your windshield, and then the big tanker truck behind it crushes it.
The giveaway was
all happened in like 2 seconds. It
started going like this on the front of the car.
It was wobbling a little bit, and I thought to myself, I can stabilize that. That's okay. I can stabilize that. Look, there it goes.
R2, go see if you can lock it down.
So the moral is that you have to put the Theta as a fin, not a sail. Like that's when wherever you're going. Fin,
good to know. Sail. Feel it, fin, not a sail. Filmtools, how fun. Andy and Aiko, pick of the week.
I'm really excited about this one. A few weeks ago, I talked about how Evernote is not going away. I don't want people. Some people on Twitter thought that I was saying that because Twitter's been bought by Evernote's been bought up by a new company. They're moving the entire company's operations to Europe, where the new buyer is. I'm not saying that they're going out of business, but it was a good excuse for me to say, well, what feature of Evernote would I absolutely be despondent over if I didn't have it anymore, either because they did go out of business or they started charging so much money they can't afford it. And it's so much of my work is saving web pages so that I have them offline. I can take them with me when I travel, and also so that in case a post gets taken down, I will still have the original. And that was what I was using Evernote for. So I've been looking for a replacement for that wouldn't require Evernote specifically. And I finally found the one that is, oh my goodness, so much better at this job. It's called SingleFile. SingleFile. It's free. It's a plugin for pretty much any web browser you can imagine. It's available on GitHub. And at its very, very surface, it does exactly the simple thing. It is a plugin that appears in your address bar. You click on it, and then it will save all the content of the web page that you're looking at and save it as a file. And it does the thing that I was really most looking for. It's not a proprietary Apple format. That was the problem of saving things from Safari, because I'd have to switch to Safari. It's not a format used by Chrome, which Safari browsers don't support, which would mean that I couldn't use this in Safari. It's saved as HTML. And saved as one simple single HTML file. Even all the images are converted to base 64, so they're actually embedded inside the HTML file. So it's just one HTML file. Any browser made within the past 10 years or whatever should be able to open this and display this on any sort of device. And it's very, very accurate and very, very fair. But in addition to that, it also has, if you hold down the Option key while you click on that icon, it has a million options to it. Yes, you can annotate, so I can add notes to it, or I can highlight stuff in it, or say, oh, just save this part of it. Don't save these parts of it. You can have it save every single tab that's in a window. You can even set it up so that every time you bookmark something, that bookmark is automatically downloaded and saved. And I'm just scratching the surface of what you can do with this. Again, it's super simple just for its one purpose. But as soon as you click on the Option key or look at the README file on the GitHub, you start to see that, oh my goodness, this is a complete solution to everything that I would ever need to do. Not only does it doesn't just replace and enhance what I'm doing in Evernote, it creates new opportunities and new workflows that let me do things I wasn't able to do at all. So yeah, huge. I mean, it's free. There is a PayPal page for Gildas Lermo, who's the head of head of the project, and yeah, I have PayPal'd him a pile of money, for within a freelance journalist scale, a pile of money, i.e. I could have protein for a couple of days based on what I've given him. But yeah, it is, I'm so happy with this. It is there's no need to look any further than beyond this for me, because anything that requires I need to save something off the web, it's there for me, and I can adapt it and use it exactly how I want it. Great stuff.
This is very cool. Yeah. I actually downloaded the last extension you mentioned that would save it as markup files, which is kind of a web clipper. Can you open, I guess it's an HTML file, so you could open it in anything that can understand HTML. And it looks like you can also take the subsidiary images and turn them into a single file, which would be great.
Again, it does that automatically. When you install it, you click it, and there's a little box that simply appears in the lower corner, give you the progress. It has to do some crunching, because again, every single image on there gets converted to base 64. You can open the HTML file in BBEdit and look at the entire thing. It is just plain HTML as a plain text file. So again, you don't have to worry about, is this a bundle? Is it, or is there a folder of images and other code that I need to include in this in order to save this? It's no, click one button. You've got one file that I've yet to find a browser that I use in my daily life, mobile, desktop, tablet.
So it works on Safari on iOS? No.
Yeah, if it's an HTML file.
Oh. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
I've got my workflow set up so that it saves to a folder on my MacBook that will be synced to Google Drive, and so I can simply open these up in Google Drive. I can share them to any of the library files, any of the library or reader apps I've got on my iPad that will convert a web address or an HTML file to PDF or whatever. Again, I've yet to see, unlike when I was saving it directly under Chrome or saving it directly under Safari as save a complete web page, I've yet to come across any application or any service or whatever that couldn't simply take this HTML file and do what I want to do with it, whether it's read it, save it, cut, copy, paste of it, include it in an archive. So yeah, I've yet to find a problem with this at all. And again, it's just something on GitHub. Just go get it and it's yours.
SingleFile on GitHub. I've installed it. Thank you for the tip. That's a really great tip. Well, it won't save secondary links. It'll save the front page. It won't save the pages linked to.
I don't, if I took a moment to look through all the options. You wouldn't want it to,
because that would be ridiculous.
Yeah. But it's amazing all the different features that it has. Again, when I came across the feature that anytime I mark something into, I've got for every week, I've got a folder of here's things I actively want to track because these are stories I might want to write or talk about. Now that I don't even have to think about it. If it's that easy, and if these HTML files are so small, and they are, it's like, well, why aren't I just simply saving every file that I think is important enough to save in this one special place? And so there you go.
It also has built-in annotation, which is pretty cool.
Again, it's like
Wow,
I was using this for weeks before I discovered that.
Yeah.
So, here's a bar full of, I can add a post-it tab to it. I can highlight this. And that is handy.
It's pretty amazing.
Gildas Lormeau, you are a clever person.
Gildas is a very smart guy. Very nice. Okay. Wow, that's a great find. Thank you, Andy. And thanks to all of you for being here. We are done for this week on MacBreak Weekly. We'll be back next week, of course, with Jason Snell, sixcolors.com. Jason does a lot of stuff, though, so if you go to sixcolors.com/Jason, you can see all the shows he does. He's basically on mic all day, every day.
All the great shows, yes. That's my microphone. It remains on at all times. And podcasts just happen spontaneously.
It's amazing.
When I'm not writing.
Anything you want to particularly plug this week?
I don't know. Check out Upgrade on Relay FM or Downstream, where we will talk. If you're interested in weird things about the future of the streaming world, Downstream on Relay FM. That's where I talk to Julie Alexander. We'll do a new episode later this week where I will cry again about the sad state of my beloved Cal football team.
I want to hear an in-depth explanation of what happened there. By then, you will have more details. That's good. Downstream, among many, on Relay.fm. Thank you, Jason. Andy and Aiko, when are you going to be on GBH next?
I'm off this week, but I'm back on Thursday at 12:30 in the afternoon. Go to wgbhnews.org to listen to it live or later.
Very nice. Thank you, Andrew. Have a wonderful week. Stay cool. Alex Lindsay spends much of his time when he's not in Hollywood making movies on officehours.global. That is a daily broadcast you can be a part of. You can join the Zoom or you can watch on YouTube. If you go to officehours.global, you'll see all the shows as they go. And you can also, get an invite to join the Zoom call. Anything in particular excites you this week?
Later today at 4 o'clock, we're going to be streaming from SIGGRAPH's floor. Wow. Myself and Nick Justitian, who's head of, we got a live view, we've got some Teradecks, we've got some streaming, we've got some cameras, and so we're going to wander. It's not very structured. There's a handful of people we know we're going to go to, but otherwise we're going to wander around the floor and talk.
That's the best fun.
Nick Justitian is head of, Oh, it is. It's really going to be a great time. So that's going to be 1 or 2 hours of us streaming and talking. So if you're interested, just look at our YouTube channel. You should be able to find it there.
Very cool. Live coverage of SIGGRAPH 2023, or go to officehours.global. But there's a YouTube channel dedicated. Thank you, Alex. That'll be fun. I look forward to watching that.
Should be a good time.
Good way to go to the show without going to the show.
Nick is head of immersive technology, director of immersive technologies at Drexel University, and we're old friends. So it should be it'll be both. We'll make it fun, but it'll probably be pretty geeky conversations about computer graphics.
4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. We do MacBreak Weekly on Tuesdays, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC. You can watch us do it live at live.twit.tv. If you're watching live, chat live in our internet relay chat. You only need a browser. Just point it to irc.twit.tv. Of course, Club Twit Discord members get behind the velvet rope in our Club Twit Discord, and you can chat there. After the fact, on-demand versions of the show available at twit.tv/mbw. On that page, you will see the show notes, but you'll also see links to our YouTube channel, which is dedicated to MacBreak Weekly, and to various podcast players. You can subscribe in those. In fact, that's my suggestion, is search for MacBreak Weekly in your favorite podcast player and subscribe. That way you'll get it automatically. You don't even have to think about it. It'll just be there for you anytime you're interested in listening to MacBreak Weekly, and we're glad you do. Audio and video, and all of those places available. Have a great week. Now it is my unfortunate duty to tell you got to get back to work because break time is over. See you next time. Listeners of this program get an ad-free version if they're members of Club Twit. $7 a month gives you ad-free versions of all of our shows, plus membership in the Club Twit Discord, a great clubhouse for Twit listeners. And finally, the Twit Plus feed with shows like Stacy's Book Club, The Untitled Linux Show, The Giz Fizz, and more. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit, and thanks for your support.